Chapter 3477. Ji Tianxing's words made Qinlan fall silent. Uncle Yan was filled with anxiety. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to remind him. Young Master Lan, be careful of that guy's tricks. Both are low-grade king-grade divine artifacts, but the divine armor he made has 30 more runes than your divine sword. If the two of you compete like this, he can save nearly a day of time compared to you. Moreover, you haven't made many mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts. I'm afraid you don't have enough experience. Before Uncle Yan could finish, Qinlan waved his hand and interrupted him. Uncle Yan, not only have I helped my master and a few elders to make mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts 7 times, but I've also made them 3 times. And all of them were successful. If we're talking about experience, I'm quite confident. However, his divine armor has 130 runes, so it can save a lot of time. Seeing that he had listened to his advice, Uncle Yan didn't say anything else. Qinlan looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "What do you want to bet with me?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Of course I want to bet some valuables such as precious treasures or divine artifacts. Do you dare?" Qinlan sneered and said, "Why wouldn't I dare? Tell me, what treasures do you want to bet?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Your master is the left protector of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. I remember that he found a great opportunity on a star when he was exploring the universe. He dug up a huge piece of primordial jade essence, which is a treasure that has been growing for 100,000 years. Not only can it be used to heal injuries, forge weapons and refine pills, but it can also be refined to increase one's strength. He seems to have divided the primordial jade essence into a few portions. He gave one to the 100 Refinements ancient sect, refined one for himself and kept a few for himself. If I'm not wrong, you're the disciple he's most proud of, so he should have given you a portion, right?" Hearing this, Qinlan was instantly on guard, and his eyes were filled with caution. "How do you know all this? You're actually thinking about Master's primordial jade essence?" Qinlan exclaimed. This matter was extremely secretive. Even within the 100 Refinements ancient sect, not many people knew about it. 200 years ago, Qinlan had made a great contribution and brought glory to his master. That was why his master had secretly rewarded him with a primordial jade marrow. From then on, he learned of the origin and effects of the primordial chalcedony. It grew in the depths of the earth's core. Even though it was nurtured within a divine jade mine, it was like fine nectar that could be directly consumed and refined. After obtaining the primordial chalcedony, Qinlan had wanted to refine it to increase her cultivation. However, the left protector had repeatedly warned him that he had to wait until he reached the peak of the 6th degree realm and break through the shackles of the high-level divine king before using it. This way he would have even greater hopes of becoming a high divine king. That was why Qinlan had kept the primordial jade quintessence all this while and had not refined it yet. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianxing would actually guess that he had this item and even wanted to use it as a wager. Without any hesitation, Qinlan rejected him decisively. "No. I will never use it as a wager. Don't even think about it." With regards to his reaction, Ji Tianxing was not surprised at all. He merely smiled and said, "Why? The competition hasn't even started and you already think that you will lose? If that's the case, you might as well admit defeat and leave Chang'e City." "How can I admit defeat?" Of course, Qinlan was not convinced, but he would not be provoked. "However, I will not use the primordial chalcedony as a wager. You can give up now." "Haha, is that so?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Since you want to bet, of course it has to be fair. My wager is as valuable as the primordial chalcedony. Don't you want to know what it is?" "What else can be as valuable as the primordial chalcedony?" Qinlan naturally did not believe him. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianxing. Uncle Yan also revealed a curious and doubtful expression as he waited for Ji Tianxing's reply. Ji Tianxing looked at the two of them and said with a playful smile, "The 100 Smelting Ancient Sect was founded more than 37,000 years ago by a peerless divine blacksmith, Xianxia. At that time, Xianxia was only obsessed with researching and crafting divine weapons. He did not have time to care about worldly affairs. In order to craft a peerless divine weapon, he spent thousands of years of effort and traveled across the universe. He searched every corner of the divine world and almost died. He was a true blacksmithing maniac and a lunatic for researching divine weapons. Fortunately, he had 4 successful disciples who used his name to create the 100 Smelting Ancient sect. After 3,000 years of development, the sect occupied a paradise and transcended the worldly affairs. It was with the power of the sect that Xianxia was able to gather the 2 sets of materials that he desperately needed. In the end, he successfully crafted a king-grade divine weapon, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Uncle Yen and Qinlan were not unfamiliar with the legend of the 100 Smelting Ancient sect's founding ancestor. However, after listening to Ji Tianqing's story, the 2 of them were not annoyed. Instead, they were filled with pride. However, when they heard the words 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, their expressions turned cold and their eyes dimmed. Ji Tianqing continued, although Lian Qianqiu did not change his ways of being a blacksmith maniac and went to the universe to search for special materials, unfortunately he died in a black hole. However, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer is indeed a peerless divine weapon. It has protected the 100 Smelting Ancient sect for more than 30,000 years. It's a pity that the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer was destroyed during the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. It turned into dust and scattered in the void. Until now, the 100 Smelting Ancient sect has not been able to craft a similar divine hammer. This should be the 100 Smelting Ancient sect's greatest wish, right? Qinlan and Uncle Yen both furrowed their brows and nodded with solemn and serious expressions. You're right. This is indeed our sect's greatest regret. What are you trying to say? Don't tell us that you can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. That would be a joke. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, although I can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, I don't have the time to spend thousands of years searching for materials. Uncle Yen and Qinlan could tell that something was amiss. Their expressions changed and their hearts jumped to their throats. What do you mean? You can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer? That's impossible. Ji Tianqing said calmly, if I'm not wrong, the 100 Smelting Ancient sect has prepared all the materials to craft a divine hammer. Unfortunately, the only thing you lack is the blueprint of the divine hammer. The 100 Smelting Divine Hammer is extremely complicated and exquisite. None of you can see through it and no one can remember it. Naturally, you won't be able to craft it. After saying that, Ji Tianqing circulated his divine force and a ball of golden light the size of an egg flew out from his forehead. The dense golden light contained a vast amount of information. It was mysterious and profound. Ji Tianqing held the golden light in his hand and looked at Qinlan with a smile. He said, coincidentally, I know the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Qinlan, which one is more precious, the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer or your primordial jade essence? Hearing this, Qinlan was so excited that his blood boiled. He stared at the golden light with a burning gaze and could not help but swallow his saliva. Is there a need to ask? Even 10 primordial jade essences cannot compare to the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Chapter 3478. Qinlan was exaggerating. However, this was also within reason. To the 100 Refinement Ancient sect, the primordial jade marrow was just a precious treasure. However, the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer was different. It was the totem of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect, the divine weapon of the sect. It was the pride and reliance of all the disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Ji Tianqing's words made Qinlan's blood boil. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. He wanted to take out the primordial jade marrow and exchange it for the blueprint of the divine hammer in Ji Tianqing's hands. However, that was impossible. Uncle Yen was also excited, but he was able to maintain his calm. Wait! He suddenly shouted coldly, interrupting Qinlan's fantasy. Young Master Tianqing, no one in the sect knows about the structure of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. How could an outsider like you know about it? Also, who can prove that the blueprint in your hands is real? Qinlan finally snapped out of his daze. He quickly nodded and asked, that's right. You can't just take out something and lie to me that it's the blueprint of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. You're taking this too lightly. Ji Tianqing smiled and said proudly, you'll know if it's real or fake when you see it. As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a golden ball of light appeared in front of Qinlan. Qinlan was stunned. He did not take the golden ball of light. Instead, he asked Ji Tianqing, if this is really the blueprint of the divine hammer, aren't you afraid that we'll memorize it? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, take a look. If you two can understand it within 3 days, I'll admit defeat. As for memorizing it, Don't even think about it. Even if everyone in the 100 Refinement Ancient sect came to see it, they wouldn't be able to memorize it. The most special thing about the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer is that other than Lian Qianqiu, no one else can memorize its blueprint. Qinlan was shocked into a daze, and a deep sense of reverence grew in her heart. Uncle Yen frowned and refuted, other than our sect's founder, no one else can memorize the blueprint. How can you memorize it? Doesn't this mean that your blueprint is fake? Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Yen Shigao, with your IQ, it's hard for us to communicate. I didn't memorize this blueprint by memory. This time Uncle Yen understood. He said, you mean you have a blueprint of the hammer and you're copying it for us? Ji Tianxing just smiled and didn't want to bother with him anymore. Qinlan could not wait any longer. She extended her trembling hands and held the golden ball of light. She used her divine sense to read the information within. Instantly, his mind was flooded with information that was as deep as the ocean. It was to the extent that his entire body froze on the spot. It was as if he had fallen asleep and almost lost consciousness. After a long time he finally calmed his mind and no longer dared to read the information in the light ball. Huff, huff, huff. Qinlan held the ball of light in her hand as she panted heavily. Her face was somewhat pale. It's too scary. Who would remember such a vast amount of information? I only saw about 10% of it and my mind almost fainted. It's too scary. Seeing that Qinlan couldn't help but exclaim, Uncle Yen looked expectant and eager to try. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, Zhang Longxiang, and the others were also very interested. They were all shocked and expectant. They were all grandmasters and divine blacksmiths. They also wanted to see how mysterious and terrifying the blueprint of a peerless divine weapon was. Soon Uncle Yen took the golden ball of light and immersed himself in it. When he took it, his reaction was even worse than Qinlan's. After only 10 breaths he felt dizzy and lost control of his mind. As if drunk, he stumbled and fell in the main hall. This is unbelievable. He quickly got up from the ground and exclaimed excitedly, this is no ordinary divine weapon. It must be a peerless divine weapon. Although I only saw less than 10% of it, I dare say that only a top divine blacksmith can create such a divine weapon. At this moment Uncle Yan's doubts were dispelled. He was completely convinced by the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and took the golden ball of light back into his hand. Qinlan and Uncle Yen stared at the ball of light with reluctance. They really wanted to snatch it back. Ji Tianxing kept the golden ball of light and asked, you've seen the blueprint. Qinlan, do you want to bet or not? This time Uncle Yen didn't have to say anything. Qinlan nodded without hesitation. Yes. Only a fool wouldn't bet. Although the primordial jade mara was precious, it wasn't as important as the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Qinlan was already fantasizing that if he won the blueprint he would become a hero of the 100 smelting ancient sect. At that time he would definitely become the chief disciple. It was even possible that he would inherit the position of the sect leader in the future. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. His face turned red. Uncle Yen didn't forget to remind him, young Master Lan, don't forget the time. Qinlan immediately sobered up. He regained his composure and said to Ji Tianxing, young Master Tianxing, I agree to bet with you. However, to be fair, I have a request. Your divine armor already has 130 laws. My divine sword only has 100. Therefore I want to start the refinement. You have to wait a day before you can continue. If you agree, we can start now. Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were filled with indignation. They immediately retorted. Qinlan, can you be any more shameless? Young Master Tianxing can inscribe 130 laws. That's his ability. Young Master Tianxing has already competed once. Now you want to continue the competition. You want to lead by a day? How dare you say that? Qinlan also felt that he was going overboard. He wanted to change the time to 20 hours. However, before he could say anything, Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. Alright, the rules are set then. Good. Qinlan was overjoyed. He quickly flattered, young Master Tianxing is indeed straightforward. You have the demeanor of a master. Since Ji Tianxing had agreed, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi had nothing to say. They could only shut their mouths. The two of them were filled with worry. They could only pray silently, hoping that Ji Tianxing would win. Soon the competition began. Qianlong was the first to open the divine cauldron. He placed the golden divine sword that he had previously refined into the cauldron and prepared to inscribe laws and restrictions. Ji Tianxing sat in the main hall with his eyes closed. He waited patiently. An hour later, Qianlan's divine sword had melted into a sword embryo. It was in a moldable state. He began to inscribe laws and restrictions. 2 hours later he had inscribed a law and stacked over 100 divine arrays and restrictions. As time passed he focused on casting the arts. He kept inscribing law and restriction after law. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing became even more anxious when they saw that he was progressing rapidly. However, Ji Tianxing kept his eyes closed. He did not look at Qianlong at all. He seemed especially calm. Chapter 3479. Unknowingly a day passed. Ji Tianxing followed the agreement and opened his eyes. He took out the 9 heavens divine cauldron and started refining. At this time, Qianlong had already engraved 27 laws and 270 array formations on his divine sword. Although compared to Ji Tianxing's divine armor, he was still short of 3 laws and 30 array formations. But he was filled with confidence and anticipation and did not feel worried at all. When Ji Tianxing started refining, he delayed for a breath of time and secretly took a look at Ji Tianxing. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was as calm and indifferent as ever. He could not see through him at all. Qianlong thought to himself, this guy is still pretending to be deep. I still can't see through him. Haha. But no matter how well you pretend, it's useless. You'll be exposed very soon. Previously, you refined continuously for 7 days and only rested for a day in between. There's no way you can maintain your peak state. Next, we still have to engrave more than 170 laws. It'll take at least half a month's time. Let's see how you can persevere. These thoughts flashed through his mind. Qianlong was no longer distracted and continued to focus on refining. The hall fell into silence. Ji Tianxing and Qianlong were both immersed in refining without any distractions. Uncle Yan, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhou Xian were all watching intently. No one made a sound, afraid that they would disturb Ji Tianxing and Qianlong. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing and Qianlong were the 2 divine blacksmiths with the highest attainments in refining among them. In this competition, the 2 of them also gave it their all and brought out their trump cards. Everyone watched intently. While they were filled with amazement and admiration, they also broadened their horizons and learned a lot of experience in refining. Especially Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian, their hearts were filled with agitation and excitement. To be able to watch 2 divine blacksmiths compete at close range was something that the 2 of them yearned for even in their dreams. Unknowingly, 3 days passed. Ji Tianxing and Qianlong were still focused on refining and did not slack off at all. But the further they went, the harder it was to refine. The speed also became slower. Qianlong had engraved 184 laws and over 1,800 formation restrictions on the divine sword. This speed was already his limit, surpassing all his previous refinements. He was confident and proud. He couldn't help but glance at Ji Tianxing. He had thought that Ji Tianxing would definitely look tired and slow down his speed. But he was disappointed. Ji Tianxing was as calm as ever without the slightest tiredness or sleepiness. His refining speed was as fast as ever. Of course. Only Ji Tianxing himself knew that the Frost Moon divine armor he was refining already had 196 nomological laws. That's right, this godly armor was called Frozen Moon. A long time ago he had planned to forge 2 divine swords and a set of divine armor for Yunyao. The dual swords of Sun and Moon had been completed a long time ago. He was going to take this opportunity to refine the Ice Moon divine armor. Unknowingly, 12 days had passed. Qianlan's refining work was finally coming to an end. He had already engraved 290 nomological laws and 2,900 formation restrictions on the divine sword. In at most another 20 hours, the divine sword would become a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. Such a fast speed was something Qianlong had never thought of in the past. Unknowingly, he had already surpassed him. His refining attainments had improved again. He was proud and self-satisfied. He couldn't help but look at Ji Tianxing opposite him. However, when he saw Ji Tianxing across from him, he was dumbfounded on the spot and was stunned. Because Ji Tianxing had just stopped and was casting spells. He raised his head and looked at him. Their eyes met. Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. But Qianlong seemed to have been struck by lightning. His body stiffened and his mind went blank. He actually already completed it? At this moment Qinlan's heart was in a mess. He felt that everything was unreal. He couldn't believe it, much less accept it. Ji Tianxing had actually completed refining a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. This couldn't be real. A deep sense of defeat filled Qinlan's mind, causing his face to turn ashen. The confidence and pride that he was brimming with earlier vanished instantly, turning into disappointment and dejection. Right then, Uncle Yen reminded him with a voice transmission, "Young Master Lan, don't be in a daze. Continue casting your spells. Otherwise, the array formation will be messed up and the divine sword will collapse." Only then did Qinlan snap out of his daze. He hurriedly suppressed his distracting thoughts and calmed himself down before continuing to refine his weapon. He muttered internally, "I haven't lost yet. I can't be distracted. No matter what, I have to refine this divine sword. Even if I lose to him, I can't embarrass myself and I can't embarrass the sect." With that belief, Qinlan entered a focused state and continued to refine his weapon without any distractions. Everyone in the hall had already seen the outcome and knew the answer. However, no one disturbed Qinlan. They waited patiently for him to finish refining his weapon. Time seemed to have slowed down. After another 24 hours, Qinlan was finally done with her artifact forging. His divine sword was successfully engraved with 300 nomological runes and 3,000 array formations. However, when he finished refining his weapon and stopped, there was only a sigh of relief. There was no joy at all. "It's over," he muttered to himself and raised his head to look at Ji Tianxing, who was in front of him. Ji Tianxing, who had been resting with his eyes closed, finally opened his eyes and said calmly, "Although the outcome is already decided, we still have to show off our results, right?" Qinlan was depressed. He nodded stiffly and waved his hand to open the cauldron lid. Swoosh! Golden light flashed. The golden divine sword flew into the air and floated quietly, shining with dazzling divine light. The appearance of the divine sword did not change much. It was just that its divine power aura was sharper and more sacred. The number of nomological runes and restrictions within it had also tripled. It had successfully become a medium-grade king-level divine weapon. At that moment, Ji Tianxing also opened the cauldron lid. Swoosh! Ice blue divine light flashed and a bone-chilling cold spread, freezing the entire hall once again. The ice moon divine armor flew into the air and floated quietly, shining with dazzling light. Compared to Qinlan's divine sword, this divine armor was more beautiful, exquisite, and dazzling. Moreover, the divine armor structure was more complicated. Its defense was stronger and it had all sorts of functions. Most importantly, the number of nomological laws contained within the armor was as many as 303. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing had held back again. Not only did he spend 1 day less than Qinlan, but he also engraved 3 more nomological runes. A complete victory. A complete victory without any suspense. At that moment, Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were cheering excitedly and clapping excitedly. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were also impressed. They clapped and cheered as they looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of respect and admiration. As for Qinlan and Uncle Yen, their expressions were ugly and gloomy. They had lost the competition. Not only did they have to withdraw from the competition, but they also had to give up on the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. What made Qinlan feel even more pained was that the primordial jade marrow that he had been saving to break through to an upper-level god king was about to change owners. Chapter 3480. Qinlan had nothing to say about the results of the competition, even though he had defeated Jiang Tianyi in the first round. However, after Ji Tianxing joined the battle, he won both battles. Everyone had seen the competition with their own eyes, and they were full of admiration for Ji Tianxing's skills. Qinlan had lost to Ji Tianxing, but he accepted it wholeheartedly and did not feel embarrassed. He could feel that the gap between him and Ji Tianxing was huge. However, this did not mean that he could accept the results. The blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer was extremely precious, and he and Uncle Yen had seen it with their own eyes. However, he regretted it now and hated that he had been blinded by the temptation. Only now did he understand why Ji Tianxing had used the blueprint, which was 10 times more precious than the primordial jade essence, as a bet. He was confident that he would win. From the start he had fallen into Ji Tianxing's trap. However, the bait was too tempting and he and Uncle Yen had no choice but to take the bait. When he thought about how the primordial jade essence, which was like his second life, was going to be given to Ji Tianqing, his heart ached and his breathing became hot. Soon the hall regained its silence. Ji Tianqing also kept the 9 heavens cauldron and ice moon divine armor, and looked at Qinlan calmly. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to speak, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing said impatiently, "Qinlan, our Jiang clan has won this competition. You have to withdraw from the competition between the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. Also, you have to accept your loss. Qinlan, it's time for you to honor your bet." Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's voices were filled with excitement and pride, and they looked at Qinlan with sympathy. Qinlan was ashamed and angry, but he could only endure it. With so many people watching, he could not go back on his words. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Qinlan said expressionlessly, "I have lost. According to the agreement, I will leave Perpetual Joy City today. Furthermore, I will not take the initiative to invite the 2 blacksmithing geniuses to join the 100 Smelting Ancient sect. However, those 2 geniuses are not willing to join the same sect, so you can only accept one at most. Do you think you have one?" Naive. Hearing Qinlan's words, the smiles on Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's faces froze. That's right. Although Qinlan wanted to withdraw from the competition, the Jiang clan could only recruit 1 artificer. It was very likely that the other genius would take the initiative to join the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Qinlan had only promised that she would not take the initiative to recruit any of them, but she had not promised to reject any of them. In the end, the 100 Refinements Ancient sect still got the upper hand. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's excitement instantly vanished. Seeing the 2 of them deflated and depressed, Qinlan revealed a smug sneer. He then turned to Ji Tianqing, cupped his fists and saluted. "Young Master Tianqing, this king admires your attainments and skills in refining artifacts, and I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. However, the primordial chalcedony was too precious, so I didn't carry it with me. I've always left it in the sect. How about this? I'll go back to the sect and get it for you now." Qinlan lowered her head slightly, observing Ji Tianxing's reaction as she spoke. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and a cold smile appeared on his face. Jiang Tianxing's face was filled with anger as he shouted, "Qinlan, are you trying to renege on your debt? This place is so far away from the 100 Refinements Ancient sect. Are you trying to buy time?" Qinlan quickly waved his hands and smiled, "You misunderstood. This king is upright, so how can I renege on my debt? If young Master Tianqing doesn't believe me, then follow me back to the sect to get it." Jiang Tianyi was also very dissatisfied and he said coldly, "Qinlan, don't play these tricks. Do you think we can't see through your thoughts?" "Ha ha." Qinlan sneered with disdain and shrugged helplessly, "You're measuring the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing I can do." Uncle Yen also quickly chimed in and said righteously, "Young Master Lan has already said that we won't renege on our debt. The primordial chalcedony will definitely be given to young Master Tianqing. However, young Master Lan didn't bring it with him, so he needs to go back to the sect to get it. How can you be so aggressive? You're shameless." Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were speechless, and they could only suppress the anger in their hearts. They both suspected that the primordial chalcedony was on Qinlan, and that Qinlan was just trying to find an excuse to escape. However, without any evidence, they couldn't do anything to Qinlan. At this time, Ji Tianqing, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. He looked at Qinlan calmly and said, "How precious is the primordial chalcedony? You must treat it like your life, so how can you not bring it with you? You probably think that this king won't fall out with you and won't search or rob you. That's why you lied so brazenly, right?" Having her thoughts exposed, Qinlan's body stiffened and her expression turned ugly. However, he immediately pretended to be angry and shouted righteously, "Young Master Tianxing, even if this king respects you as a senior, you can't slander me and frame me for no reason. Everything I said is true. If you don't believe me, you can follow me back to the 100 Refinements Ancient sect." Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and interrupted him. He said calmly, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. As long as you set up an altar and swear to the heavens that you don't have the primordial chalcedony, if you go against your oath, you're willing to be struck by lightning until you're reduced to ashes. Your divine Tao will be destroyed and you'll never be reincarnated. As long as you do that, this king will believe you. How about that? You. Qin Lan's face turned green, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He would never dare to swear to the heavens in such a solemn manner. After all, one couldn't simply swear an oath. The heavens would fulfill it. Seeing that Qin Lan was speechless, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing laughed mockingly and scolded him. Ha! Qin Lan, are you feeling guilty? You don't dare to swear to the heavens, do you? You're still saying that you're not going to go back on your word? To think that you were acting so well just now. I didn't expect you to be exposed so quickly. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang watched from the side. They didn't have the right to interrupt. However, there was a subtle change in their expressions. Their impression of Qin Lan dropped even further. Actually, everyone already knew the answer in their hearts. Qin Lan was so embarrassed that he wanted to make an oath on the altar. However, Uncle Yan pulled him back and advised him, "Young Master Lan, don't be rash. You can't simply swear such an oath. It's very easy for it to come true. The price is too high." After saying that, he glared at Ji Tianxing and said coldly, "Young Master Tianxing, you're being so overbearing. Don't you think you're looking down on the 100 Refinements ancient sect? Furthermore, you're a senior expert. How can you make things difficult for a junior? You even forced young Master Lan to swear such a vicious oath?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "You're right. This king really doesn't care about the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Cut the crap. If you don't hand over the primordial jade essence today, don't even think about leaving the Gold Laurel Palace." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3481. It seems like you're determined to offend the 100 Refinements ancient sect and not let us go? Qin Lan also flew into a rage out of humiliation. He glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing and asked in a deep voice. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing sneered. Qin Lan, you're really good at twisting the truth. You're the one who refused to honor your bet and yet you're still trying to twist the truth? Qin Lan, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Luckily there are so many of us here. If you're determined to go back on your word, we'll let the other clans see how despicable you are. Although Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang did not speak, they knew that things were serious. Both of them retreated to the edge of the hall to avoid being implicated. Ji Tianxing glared at Qin Lan and said sternly, "I'll say it one last time. Hand over the primordial jade essence or you'll have to bear the consequences." Bear the consequences. Uncle Yan was completely enraged. His body shone with a dazzling divine light as his divine energy surged. "You've gone too far. I won't give in. If you want to bully young Master Lan, you'll have to go through me first." As he spoke, Uncle Yan stepped in front of Qin Lan and spoke in a dignified manner. "Young Master Lan, I'll cover your escape." Qin Lan had the same idea. However, how could he act so cowardly in front of so many people? His body shone with divine light as his divine energy surged. He said confidently, "Uncle Yan, we're disciples of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Of course we'll leave with our heads held high. I'd like to see what kind of ability this guy has to be so arrogant." Seeing Qin Lan and Uncle Yan's boiling fighting spirit, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing also laughed out of anger, their bodies bursting with fighting spirit. "What? Not only do you want to go back on your word, you want to fight? You want to fight now that you can't go back on your word? Who's afraid of who? Come on." The two brothers stepped forward and stood on Ji Tianxing's left and right. The atmosphere in the hall instantly became hostile. On the surface, Qin Lan and Uncle Yan only had 2 people while Ji Tianxing had 3 people. Moreover, Ji Tianxing was a senior expert with a mysterious background. Qin Lan and Uncle Yan's aura was immediately suppressed. Their eyes were filled with fear. Uncle Yan frowned and instructed Qin Lan via voice transmission, "Young Master Lan, I'll hold the 3 of them back. You take the opportunity to escape from the back. As long as you shake them off, they will be wary of the 100 Refinement ancient sect and won't do anything to me." This time their conversation would not be heard by anyone else. Without waiting for Uncle Yan to finish, Qin Lan replied without hesitation, "All right, then be careful." Uncle Yan's expression was a little strange, and he quickly swallowed the rest of his words back into his stomach. In the next moment he shouted in a tragic tone and waved his fists to attack Ji Tianxing. "This old man will not tolerate your bullying." Uncle Yan used all of his power and instantly sent out 49 flaming fists towards Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing. Each of the flaming fists was as big as a water tank and their divine power was violent. They also contained dozens of divine Dao laws and their power was terrifying. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's expressions were solemn. They used all of their divine power to block and neutralize Uncle Yan's attack. However, before they could do anything, they saw a blur in front of their eyes, and a sky full of sword light bloomed. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ji Tianxing had made his move. Unknowingly, he held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and instantly sent out 49 flaming white sword lights to meet Uncle Yan's attack. Bang, 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 bang. Muffled sounds erupted as the 49 flaming fist lights were shattered by the sword light, and divine flames that covered the heavens and the earth burst forth. However, the white sword lights tore through space and caused a few pitch-black voids to appear in the hall. The divine flames that covered the sky and earth were all swallowed by the dark voids and no one was harmed. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were shocked. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were secretly relieved, and their respect for Ji Tianxing grew. Uncle Yan was also stunned. He had expected Ji Tianxing to be more powerful than him, most likely a high-level divine lord. However, he had never thought that Ji Tianxing would use such a simple and violent method to neutralize his attack. The hall was still intact, and his plan to create chaos and give Qinlan a chance to escape had failed. However, he didn't want to give up. He shouted again and used a divine power. This time he had learned his lesson. Attacking Ji Tianxing was secondary. His main goal was to disperse his attacks and destroy the entire hall to create chaos. However, Uncle Yan was about to use his divine power when he saw a blur in front of his eyes and a figure appeared out of nowhere. In his eyes, there was a fist that was rapidly enlarging. Uncle Yan realized that something was wrong and instinctively wanted to retreat. However, it was too late. Boom! With a loud bang, Ji Tianxing's golden left fist hit Uncle Yan's forehead. Uncle Yan was immediately sent flying and smashed into the wall 100 feet away. More than half of the wall collapsed and countless pieces of rock were sent flying. Uncle Yan, on the other hand, fell to the ground. His consciousness was blurry and he was unconscious. It was obvious that Ji Tianxing's punch had passed through his forehead and hit his mind, knocking him out. Swish! While the divine light flashed and the pieces of rock were sent flying, Qinlan decisively retreated and passed through the collapsed wall, trying to escape the gold osmanthus palace. However, he had just flown out of the hall and appeared in the sky above the manor when a white figure flashed in front of him. Ji Tianxing had blocked his way. Swish! Qinlan didn't hesitate and used his teleportation technique to move a few thousand miles away from Chang'e City. Unfortunately, the moment he used his teleportation ability, Ji Tianxing slashed out a blazing white sword light and sealed off the entire space of the Gold Laurel Palace. The space around Qinlan froze. He was like a mosquito in ice, unable to move at all. Swish! A cold light flashed and the pitch-black and cold sword of burial of heaven was placed against his neck. Qinlan's body stiffened and his expression turned ugly. He didn't dare to act rashly. The battle had just begun, but it ended abruptly just like that. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing, who had followed closely behind, held their divine weapons and looked murderous. However, when they saw that Uncle Yan had been knocked unconscious and Qinlan had surrendered, they were stunned and quickly put away their weapons. Soon Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant appeared in the courtyard. Qinlan was utterly humiliated in front of everyone. He was furious and humiliated to the extreme. He made up his mind and roared at Ji Tianxing, "I don't have the jade essence, but I do have a life." Ji Tianxing narrowed his eyes and exuded a bone-chilling aura. He asked in a low voice, "Are you sure?" Seeing that he was really angry and filled with murderous intent, Qinlan didn't doubt that he would really kill him. Thus, Qinlan quickly corrected himself. I'm not sure. Senior, I was just joking." Chapter 3482. If it were anyone else, Qinlan would bet that they would be afraid of the 100 smelting ancient sect's reputation and would not dare to kill him. But Ji Tianxing was different. This guy had a mysterious background and was decisive in his methods. His strength was unfathomable. Most importantly, this guy looked calm and low-key, but in reality he was lawless and killed people like they were grass. Qinlan did not dare to risk his life, so he chose to admit defeat. Seeing Ji Tianxing's brows relax and the cold murderous aura dissipate, Qinlan heaved a sigh of relief. His back was already drenched in cold sweat, and his limbs were numb from the bone-chilling cold. Qin grinned and opened his spatial ring with trembling hands. He took out a ball of light. Swoosh. It was an ice blue ball of light. It was dazzling and filled with divine power. Within the ball of light there was a ball of white water droplets. They were as bright as diamonds but also as clear as nectar. Even though they were separated by the ice blue ball of light, everyone could feel the surging power of the white water droplets. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment. After confirming that it was a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony, he kept the burial of heaven. You can get lost now. He kept the primordial chalcedony in his spatial ring and looked at Qin from the corner of his eyes. Qin glared at him viciously. He did not dare to say another word and quickly turned to fly away. But just as he flew 1,000 feet away, Ji Tianqing shouted again. Take Yan Shangao away. Qin was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that Uncle Yan had been knocked unconscious by Ji Tianqing and was still lying in the ruins. He was so embarrassed that he could not show his face. He flew back to the half-collapsed hull, carried the unconscious Uncle Yan, and quickly left the Gold Laurel Palace. After a while, the Gold Laurel Palace regained its peace. Only Ji Tianqing, Jiang Tianyi, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang were left. Ji Tianqing did not care about what happened next. Jiang Tianyi looked at the two blacksmithing geniuses with a smile and said sincerely, Lin Zhen, Zhang Longxiang, I already know about the two of you. Both of you are very talented and you are very lucky to have met ninth brother. If you join our Jiang clan, you will be able to learn more profound refining techniques. Only then will you have the chance to break through to the God King realm. Although this prince knows that there are some grudges between the two of you and that you don't want to coexist for the time being. But I have already thought of a countermeasure and arranged everything. If the two of you join the Jiang clan, I will let the two of you cultivate separately. You won't see each other and won't disturb each other. Jiang Tianyi knew it was futile. He was destined to only be able to recruit one genius and lose the other. However, he still wanted to give it a try and make a final effort. After persuading them earnestly, he looked at Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang expectantly and asked, May I ask if you are willing to join the Jiang clan? Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang looked at Ji Tianqing at the same time and nodded. I'm willing. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianqing were both overjoyed and surprised. Seeing that they were one step closer to success, the two of them felt a little nervous. Jiang Tianqing asked carefully, Even if the other party joins the Jiang clan, you don't mind? Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang looked at each other and turned their heads away with contempt and disdain. The two of them looked at Ji Tianqing and nodded at the same time. We don't mind. What? Are you serious? Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianqing were stunned. They thought they had heard wrongly and were in disbelief. They didn't expect the two blacksmithing geniuses to change their minds and join the Jiang clan at the same time. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing the two brothers so excited and in disbelief, Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang nodded again to confirm. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianqing were sure that they didn't hear wrongly and didn't see wrongly. They couldn't hold back their excitement and cheered. That's great. Both of you know the big picture. You are indeed talented. The Jiang clan needs geniuses like you. That's right. You can't throw away your bright future just because of a fit of pique. You have chosen to join the Jiang clan. This is the best decision you have made in your life. For many years to come, you will thank yourselves for making the right choice. The two brothers were excited and in high spirits. At this moment, Zhang Longxiang asked, May I know what position Senior Tianqing holds in the Jiang clan? May I be so bold and shameless as to ask to be Senior Tianqing's disciple? Will I be so lucky? Lin Zhen panicked when he heard Zhang Longxiang speak first. He quickly said, I was about to say this, but Zhang Longxiang beat me to it. I Lin Zhen beg Senior Tianqing to take me in. Although I am mediocre and stupid, I dare not hope for Senior's love. But as long as Senior agrees, even if this disciple has to follow by your side as a servant, I'm willing to do so. Zhang Longxiang looked sideways and shouted angrily, Lin Zhen, how can you be so shameless? I was the one who suggested it first. Lin Zhen smirked and raised his chin. So what if you said it first? The key is who Senior Tianqing chooses. Zhang Longxiang said angrily, Even if he chooses me, he won't choose you. You greasy-faced, hypocritical, cunning fellow. Hee hee. Lin Zhen still smirked. That's because you're too dumb and stupid. It'd be strange if Senior likes you. The two blacksmithing geniuses started arguing in front of everyone again. Ji Tianxing looked indifferent and did not take it to heart. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were dumbfounded. The two brothers looked at each other awkwardly and secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission. Looks like we're thinking too much. The two of them are willing to join the Jiang clan not because they've thought it through, but because of young Master Tianxing. That's right. If they were attracted by the Jiang clan's environment and resources, they would have agreed from the start. Now that they're arguing so fiercely, it's all for young Master Tianxing. There's no choice. Young Master Tianxing is too mysterious and demonic. The two of them would rather be young Master Tianxing's servants than join our Jiang clan. We really have to thank young Master Tianxing for this. He's helped us a lot. If not for him, this matter would not have been resolved. One of the geniuses would have been snatched away by Qinlan. Then why didn't you believe me before? Why did you doubt young Master Tianxing's ability? Seventh brother, don't blame me. I was worried that things would go wrong and we'd lose two blacksmithing geniuses. But speaking of which, my attitude was not good and I offended young Master Tianxing. I'll have to apologize to him later. I hope he won't take it to heart. He's our Jiang clan's benefactor. If the clan leader knows that I offended him, he'll skin me alive. The two brothers whispered to each other through telepathy. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang stopped arguing. This was because Ji Tianxing said something. I haven't taken in any disciples for many years, nor have I taught others how to refine weapons. Since you've joined the Jiang clan, someone will naturally arrange for your cultivation and learning. Chapter 3483. Ji Tianxing refused. The two blacksmithing geniuses had nothing to fight over. After all, this senior of the Jiang clan had a high status. His abilities and methods were too mysterious. Although the two of them had pretty good talent in artifact refinement, they were only two high divine lords. They definitely did not have the qualifications to discuss any conditions with a divine king powerhouse. Jiang Tianxing asked when he saw that Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant were silent. Their expressions and eyes were filled with disappointment and regret. Then, are you still willing to join the Jiang clan? As soon as he said it, he regretted it. Jiang Tianyi even glared at him and scolded him through voice transmission. Are you a pig? Jiang Tianxing wanted to slap himself. Luckily, Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. Since we've agreed to join the Jiang clan, how can we go back on our words? Although we're not strong enough, we won't go back on our words. We'll definitely fulfill our promise. Although they did not meet their expectations, they could not take back their words. A man could not live without integrity. If the two of them couldn't even do this, how could they maintain their firm will and become divine blacksmiths that they would look up to for the rest of their lives? Not long after, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest left the Gold Laurel Palace. Previously, they had spent nearly 28 days in the Gold Laurel Palace to compete in refining weapons. But in reality, only 5 days and a few hours had passed in the outside world. When they left the Gold Laurel Palace, the sky was just starting to brighten. Jiang Tianyi looked at Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang and said, "We'll be leaving Chang'e City soon and returning to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. You have 6 hours to pack your bags and say goodbye to your families. At noon we'll meet at the south gate of Chang'e City." Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang nodded to show that they understood. Then they bowed and left. After they returned home, Jiang Tianyi brought Jiang Tianxing and Ji Tianxing to the south gate of Chang'e City. The three of them bathed in the morning mist and breathed in the fresh air. They were in a good mood. Of course, the Jiang brothers were excited because they had won against the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and obtained 2 blacksmithing geniuses. The reason Ji Tianxing was so happy was because of the primordial chalcedony. 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony. Its effects were even more ferocious than high-grade king-grade divine pills. I have to find some time to refine it and break through to the 3rd heaven of the God King realm. After reaching the 3rd stage realm, you're not far from becoming a middle divine king. He calculated in his heart that after he became a middle-level God King, he would be able to sweep away all of the middle-level God Kings. Even if he met a 7th stage realm high-level God King, he would not be afraid at all. Just as Ji Tianxing was filled with longing, Jiang Tianxing's voice rang in his ears. "Young Master Tianxing, I would like to solemnly apologize to you for my previous recklessness and rudeness. It's my fault for being blind and lacking in knowledge." Ji Tianxing's thoughts were interrupted. He looked sideways at Jiang Tianxing and frowned. He didn't say anything, but Jiang Tianxing's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, it's over. Is my apology not sincere enough? From the looks of it, you must be holding a grudge against me. What should I do? When he thought of this, he looked at Jiang Tianyi for help. Jiang Tianyi was also very worried. He hurriedly persuaded, young Master Tianxing, ninth brother is young and ignorant. He didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive us. As they spoke, the two brothers bowed apologetically as if they were admitting their mistakes and apologizing for their sins. Ji Tianxing was even more speechless. He chuckled and said, am I such a petty person? Jiang Tianxing was about to say something, but Jiang Tianyi secretly pinched him and answered with a smile, of course not. But ninth brother must apologize for his mistake. I hope you can forgive him. Alright, I never blamed him in the first place. There's no need to talk about forgiveness. Ji Tianxing waved his hand. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief. The two brothers hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing's footsteps. Jiang Tianyi asked, young Master Tianxing, how do you know so much about the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Also, we've only heard of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. Not only do you know it thoroughly, you even have the blueprint? Jiang Tianxing hurried over and asked mysteriously, young Master Tianxing, the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer must be fake, right? You only used it to provoke Qinlan and make him agree to compete with you. Because you're certain that you can win and take away his primordial jade essence, right? Jiang Tianxing was very agitated and spoke very quickly. But just as he finished speaking, he was slapped by Jiang Tianyi on the back of his head and rolled his eyes. Jiang Tianxing finally reacted. He was too agitated and said the wrong thing again. Although Jiang Tianyi also suspected that Ji Tianxing's blueprint was fake, he still thought about it. But this was something that everyone could only think in their hearts. How could they ask? What surprised Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing even more was that Ji Tianxing was not angry. Instead, he said calmly, is it important whether it's real or fake? Anyway, Qinlan didn't get it, right? The two brothers immediately understood and nodded their heads. Yes, young Master Tianxing is right. Too amazing. Indeed, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Too admirable. After a round of flattery, Jiang Tianxing raised another question. But, young Master Tianxing, although we know that the blueprint is fake, Qinlan and the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are certain that it's real. This news will definitely spread to the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Those old fellows will definitely go crazy looking for you. No matter what method they use, they will definitely get the blueprint. Won't you be in danger then? Before Ji Tianxing could reply, Jiang Tianyi glared at Jiang Tianxing again. If young Master Tianxing isn't worried, what are you worried about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing is very powerful. He said that even Su Bailian has to call him senior. What's there to worry about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing wants to follow us back to the Divine Attraction Grotto. Those old fellows from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect won't dare to barge into the Divine Attraction Grotto and snatch him from the Jiang clan. Jiang Tianxing pondered for a while and felt that it made sense. He nodded his head and said, that's right. Then we have nothing to worry about. Unknowingly, the three of them had passed through Chang'e City and arrived at the South Gate. Originally, the three of them were going to wait for Lin Zhen and Zhanlong Xiang at the South Gate. However, Ji Tianxing did not want to waste time. He entered Jiang Tianyi's palace first. He entered the secret room, took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and entered the distorted space to cultivate. Although he said that he was going to cultivate in seclusion, he was actually going to use the time to refine the primordial jade marrow and break through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm as soon as possible. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing could only wait at the city gate. It was still early. The two brothers had nothing to do, so they started to chat. 7th brother, how did you meet young Master Tianxing? How can there be such a coincidence? Oh right, what's his cultivation level? Logically speaking, he saved the Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. He should be a peak divine king, right? But why doesn't he look like one? Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3484. Even though the Jiang clan did not have a peak divine king, but there were still a few high-ranked divine kings. But Jiang Tianxing observed Ji Tianxing for so long and did not see any signs or aura of a high-ranked divine king. Jiang Tianyi also frowned, recalling the scene of Ji Tianxing and Bai Feng fighting back then. He was very clear that Bai Feng only had 7th level divine king realm strength. an existence at the bottom of the hierarchy among high-ranked divine kings. But Ji Tianxing fought with Bai Feng for so long. Not only did he not win easily, he was even injured, appearing a little wretched. This proved that Ji Tianxing's strength was inferior to Bai Feng's. Which was also to say that not only was he not a peak divine king, he was not even a high-ranked divine king. Because of this, Jiang Tianyi also suspected before in his heart and muttered for a long time. But apart from that, Ji Tianxing's performance did not have any problems. For a moment he was also somewhat at a loss. Seeing his reaction, Jiang Tianyi could not resist asking, "Seventh brother, this young master Tianxing's strength. There wouldn't really be a problem, right?" Jiang Tianyi waved his hand and said, "Although there are some problems, I still can't figure it out until now. But don't pursue it either. Everyone has their own experiences, stories, and unspeakable troubles. Rashly probing into other people's past will incur enmity in light cases and enmity in heavy cases. You have to remember this point and never do it again in the future. Furthermore, young Master Tianxing has no ill intentions towards us and even helped us greatly. That's enough." Jiang Tianyi nodded half understanding and did not say anything else. Finally 6 hours passed. The scorching sun rose into the sky. Lin Zhen and Zhan Longxiang arrived at the southern city gate one after another. Lin Zhen was escorted out of Perpetual Joy City by the Lin family, full of reluctance. Zhan Longxiang's situation was much bleaker. There were only a few junior brothers and sisters behind him. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi were both divine kings, high and mighty major figures. They naturally would not persuade the Lin family and Perpetual Joy Dao College people. The two of them watched coldly from the sidelines, silently watching Lin Zhen and Zhan Longxiang wave goodbye to their family and friends. Then Jiang Tianyi took out his palace and brought the two artifact refinement geniuses into the firmament, flying away. On the other side, Qin Lan and Uncle Yan were on a divine ship, flying towards the southeast at lightning speed. Uncle Yan's injuries were not serious and he had already regained consciousness. However, his face was very gloomy, and his eyes flashed with terrifying killing intent. Qin Lan's face was also dark. Her aura was ice-cold and she was silent. Although the two of them did not speak, their thoughts were the same. Qin Lan had already sent a message to the left protector and sect master of the 100 Refinements ancient sect about what had happened in the Gold Kasha Palace. However, the two of them still felt that they had to return to the 100 Refinements ancient sect as soon as possible and explain some matters to the left protector and the sect master. Both of them were silent for a long time. Uncle Yan suddenly opened his mouth and exhorted Qin Lan, "Young Master Lan, although I was injured by Tianxing and your primordial jade essence was cheated by him, I still have a chance. However, these were all trivial matters. Even if the left protector and the sect master knew about it, they might not make a big fuss over it. Therefore, the main point of our report is the blueprint of the 100 refining divine hammer. Only the blueprint can provoke the elders, the two protectors and the sect master. Believe me, if we make use of the blueprint, the sect master, the protectors and the elders will go crazy and attack Tianxing with all their might. When that happens, our chance for revenge will come." Uncle Yan's tone was very serious and his words were very sincere. There was also a hint of hatred in his voice. However, Qin Lan was very upset. When he heard the two words Tianxing, he was about to explode. His chest was burning with flames and his eyes were filled with killing intent. As such, he growled impatiently, "Of course I know that. Do I need you to remind me? Of course your injuries are not important. However, my primordial jade essence is very important. That is a treasure that I am saving for when I break through to the upper divine king stage. That's my lifeblood. Do you understand?" Uncle Yan was flustered by Qin Lan's roar. He subconsciously looked below Qin Lan's waist. "What are you looking at?" Qin Lan glared at him with reddened eyes and growled again. Uncle Yan was completely speechless. He decided to ignore him and focus on driving the divine worship. At the same time, in a certain empire in the middle of the Hengshan region, a dazzling golden light streaked across the sky like an aurora, flying towards the south. The object in the golden light was not the divine worship. Instead, it was a huge hairpin that was about 1,000 feet long. Without a doubt, this was the space-piercing hairpin of the divine envoy Shadow Executioner. Inside the space-piercing hairpin, there were only divine envoy Shadow Executioner, divine envoy Ku Yun, divine envoy Xianxia and Bai Feng. Over the past few days, The 4 divine kings had been taking turns to drive the space-piercing hairpin, rushing to the Hengshan region as quickly as possible. During this process, the 3 divine envoys even asked Bai Feng to cast a spell to detect the whereabouts of Ji Tianxing and the others. Fortunately, the results of Bai Feng's investigation allowed the 3 divine envoys to heave a sigh of relief. Ji Tianxing and the others were still in the Hengshan region. Furthermore, they had stopped within the Hengshan Empire and had not moved. This result caused the 3 divine envoys' eyes to light up. They were filled with hope. Could it be that those traitors are hiding in the Hengshan Empire and not running away anymore? They must have thought that they would be safe after escaping into the Hengshan region and hiding within the Hengshan Empire. But they would never have imagined that we still have Divine King Bai Feng. No matter where they escape to, Divine King Bai Feng will be able to find them. Since they are hiding in the Hengshan Empire and not leaving, then things will be easy. Thus, the space-piercing hairpin rushed towards the Hengshan Empire. The 3 divine envoys also made up their minds to find Ji Tianxing and the others even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground. Just this afternoon, after the space-piercing hairpin entered the Hengshan Empire, the 3 divine envoys then asked Bai Feng to cast a secret spell to detect the whereabouts of Ji Tianxing and the others. Although they knew that Ji Tianxing and the others were in the Hengshan Empire, the Hengshan region was too large. However, the Hengshan Empire was too big, so it was impossible to find Ji Tianxing and the others in a short period of time. Only when Bai Feng cast a secret spell to roughly determine the whereabouts of Ji Tianxing and the others would they be able to search for them. Hearing the orders of the 3 divine envoys, Bai Feng felt like cursing in his heart. Every time he cast a secret spell, he would use up a huge amount of divine power. His mind would also be extremely tired. More importantly, he could vaguely sense that every time he cast a secret spell, it would affect his lifespan and divine Dao foundation. Thus, he would only cast it once or twice every few years. But now he had to use it every few days. Moreover, the 3 divine envoys were staring at him with a firm attitude. He had to cast a secret spell. Apart from casting a secret spell, he also had to take turns controlling the space-piercing hairpin. Bai Feng was already very tired. He felt like he was about to be hollowed out. But he could not disobey the orders. He could only grit his teeth and continue casting the secret spell. Finally, he found the whereabouts of Ji Tianxing and the others. They are still in the Hengshan Empire, but they have already moved. They are fleeing towards the south. After he found out, Bai Feng collapsed to the ground with a pale face. He was completely exhausted. Chapter 3485. Unfortunately, the 3 divine envoys only cared about the results. They did not care about Bai Feng's condition. Was he tired? Could he persevere? At this moment they were all very excited and they looked as if they were determined to win. That's great. They are still in the Hengshan Empire and are not far from us. That's not right. They did not move for the past few days. Why did they suddenly move today? Could it be that they also have some divine ability that can detect our approach? That's impossible. They are not Bai Feng. How could they have such ability? No matter what, we are now in the Hengshan Empire and are very close to them. Didn't they escape towards the south? Let's just chase them towards the south. If there are no accidents, we can find them within 2 days at most. Alright, let's fly towards the south now. At the same time, inform the group of god kings behind us to catch up as soon as possible. The 3 divine envoys discussed for a while and quickly came up with a plan. Throughout the entire process, no one looked at Bai Feng. Bai Feng forcefully propped up his nearly unconscious body and crawled up from the ground. He silently put away his command flag. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground and consumed a divine pill to recover his divine power. As for where Ji Tianxing and the others were and when they would be caught, he did not care at all. He only knew. He was very tired now. His entire body had been hollowed out and his mind was in a daze. If he did not properly recuperate, his foundation of the divine Dao would be destroyed. Not to mention that he would become a cripple, but his strength would also regress and affect his future cultivation. Of course, recuperating was not something that could be completed in 3 to 5 days. If possible, he really wanted to recuperate in seclusion for 3 to 5 years. Inside the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda. Only a day and a half had passed in the outside world, but Ji Tianxing had already been in seclusion for 2.5 months. In these 2.5 months he only did one thing. Refine the primordial chalcedony. Although a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony was an excellent god-king grade material. If he spent some time and effort and added a few top-grade herbs, he could refine it into a high-grade king-grade divine pill. After consuming it, the effects would be excellent and its power would double. However, Ji Tianxing could not wait any longer. He had neither the time nor the means to find so many top-notch medicinal herbs. After all, wanting to gather those few medicinal herbs, they very likely had to search the entire boundless heaven continent. He might even have to enter the grotto heavens and blessed lands to make deals with the ancient clans. In fact, he even had to leave the firmament and enter the void to search for some of the top-tier materials. After some rough estimation, these things were not something that could be completed in 3 to 5 years. At least 100 years. How could Ji Tianxing have so much time to waste? Therefore he chose to refine the primordial chalcedony directly. This was the simplest and most crude method. Of course, the effect was also the weakest. If one were to say that refining the primordial chalcedony into a high-grade king-level divine pill would double the effects, then refining it into a high-grade king-level divine pill would have double the effect. If he directly refined the primordial jade marrow now, he would only have 60% to 70% of the effect. But Ji Tianxing didn't care. The primordial chalcedony was precious, but the treasures he had in his previous life were much more valuable than it. Furthermore, he was confident that he would obtain more treasures similar to the primordial chalcedony in the future. 2.5 months was enough for Ji Tianxing to completely refine the primordial chalcedony. What was gratifying was that the effect was not bad. He successfully absorbed the energy of the primordial chalcedony and his divine power increased by several times. Then he naturally broke through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm. That was not all. After breaking through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm, his power was still increasing rapidly without any signs of stopping. Every few days his power would increase by 1-fold. After 2.5 months, when the potential of the primordial chalcedony was exhausted, he reached the 3rd level of the Divine King realm. That's right. He was indeed in the 3rd level of the Divine King realm, just 1 step away from the Great Circle. In other words, he was only 2 steps away from becoming a 4th-level Divine King. This result surprised Ji Tianxing. But after thinking about it carefully, it was reasonable. In my previous life, I once obtained a portion of the primordial chalcedony from the left guardian of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. I spent a lot of time and effort to refine it into a king-grade high-grade divine pill. After consuming it, my power did increase by 1-fold. But at that time I was in the 9th level of the Divine King realm, very close to the peak. Now I am only in the 2nd level of the Divine King realm. It is normal for me to have such an effect after refining a portion of the primordial chalcedony. Ji Tianxing thought about it and felt relieved. But he still felt that it was a pity. He sighed to himself. It is a pity that there is not much of this primordial chalcedony. If there was half more, I would be able to break through to the 4th level of the Divine King realm. At that time I would be able to become a middle-level Divine King and save so much time. His situation was getting more and more dangerous. Therefore his desire for power was getting stronger and stronger. It was also because of this that he wasted such a precious item and could not wait to refine the primordial chalcedony. Phew. After ending his seclusion, Ji Tianxing let out a long breath and decided to leave the distorted space-time. Zhoush. He left the divine pagoda and returned to the secret room in the Palace of Heaven's Will. At this time the door of the secret room flashed with divine light and let out a series of hurried chimes. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing, who was originally in a relaxed and happy mood, suddenly frowned and the smile on his face disappeared. What's going on? Why is it so urgent that Jiang Tianyi directly knocked on the door? This thought flashed through his mind. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and cast a spell to open the door of the secret room. Ka. The moment the door of the secret room opened, Ji Tianxing saw an anxious young man in golden armor standing outside the door. It was not Jiang Tianyi but Jiang Tianxing. Ji Tianxing had just stepped out of the secret room and did not even have time to ask Jiang Tianxing what had happened. Jiang Tianxing was burning with anxiety. He shouted at an extremely fast speed, "Young Master Tianxing, we have been intercepted." As he spoke, he could not help but pull Ji Tianxing towards the palace's main entrance. Intercepted? By who? Ji Tianxing asked with a frown as he quickly followed and walked towards the main entrance. I don't know them, but those 4 fellows are all god kings. As Jiang Tianxing spoke, he unsheathed his sword and exuded an intense fighting spirit. Seventh brother said that he knows one of the god kings and that he is currently dealing with them. Jiang Tianxing's words were muddled, and Ji Tianxing did not understand what was going on. He simply stopped asking Jiang Tianxing and flew to the palace's main entrance in a flash. Then he clearly saw the scene outside the palace and understood what was going on. The Palace of Heavens was located in the southernmost part of the Hongshan Empire, not far from the border. The palace was suspended in the air above a barren mountain range, surrounded by clouds and mist. 100 miles ahead within the hazy clouds, there were indeed 4 god kings. They fanned out and blocked the palace's path. Ji Tianxing recognized 2 of the god kings. They were Stellar Aspect and Bai Feng. There was no doubt that Stellar Aspect and the others had found their way here. Chapter 3486. Ji Tianxing was still in a daze when he saw Oracle Xianxia, Bai Feng and the others. There was only one thought in his mind. Although I already knew that Divine Emissary Stellar Aspect had gathered 2 Divine Emissaries and many God Kings to try and kill me on a grand scale, I didn't expect that Divine Emissary Stellar Aspect would try to kill me. But shouldn't they be in the Red Dragon region? Why are they in the Hongshan Empire? Could it be that our whereabouts have been exposed? Oracle Xianxia has this ability? No. It's definitely not Oracle Xianxia. Looking at Bai Feng's tired face, it should be related to him. Ji Tianxing vaguely remembered that Bai Feng was not only a high-level god king, but also had the bloodline of the Phoenix clan and a pair of mysterious god eyes. Therefore Ji Tianxing's first suspect was Bai Feng. Actually, Bai Feng felt very bitter. He was already dog-tired. Wasn't it comfortable to rest in the sky-piercing hairpin? He could rest for 3 to 5 years, and when he returned to his peak he would be a good man again. But Oracle Xianxia was different. In just a day and a half he was lucky enough to block Jiang Tianyi's palace. And Oracle Xianxia was even more shameless. He had just blocked Jiang Tianyi's palace when he put away the sky-piercing hairpin. Then the 3 divine envoys appeared in the sky with murderous looks on their faces. They fanned out to block the path of the palace. Bai Feng was naturally in trouble. After the sky-piercing hairpin was put away he appeared in the sky. And he was defenseless, mentally exhausted, and his god power was weak. This was very awkward. He wanted to be like the 3 oracles, blocking the sky with murderous intent. But he could not. He felt that he was not qualified to participate in this battle. He was not qualified. Even though he was a high-level god king in his current situation he could not even take down Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi, let alone Ji Tianxing. He wanted to return to the sky-piercing hairpin or leave this place to find a place to rest. However, the atmosphere in the field was tense and full of murderous intent. He could not open his mouth. Therefore he could only stay in the sky to make up the numbers. At most he did not make a sound and tried to reduce his presence. But even so, when Jiang Tianyi walked out of the palace gate he noticed him at first glance. When Ji Tianxing appeared at the gate of the palace he also saw him at first glance. As for the first glance, of course it was at Oracle Xianxia. Both parties hovered in the sky, 100 miles apart, looking at each other. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi's eyes were filled with murderous intense eyes. On the other hand, Stellar Aspect Ambassador was filled with pride, excitement. His face was filled with a sinister and cruel sneer. He's Sesses you Xianzes. Xianzes his Xianzes Chen Xianzes at the very least. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi could clearly sense Oracle Xing Xianzes. They could not imagine just how much Ji Tianxing had offended Stellar Aspect Emissary to such an extent that he would hate Ji Tianxing so much. Ji Tianxing was not worried or hesitant at all. He glanced at Oracle Xianxia and said, "You've been looking for helpers to kill me, there's nothing strange about that. But aren't you going to introduce those 2 fellows beside you? And what's with that soft-footed Bai Feng?" Ji Tianxing was not anxious at all, and there was not even much anger or killing intent on his face. It was just a casual question as if he was chatting, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Oracle Xianxia was not stupid. He did not reveal Bai Feng's god eyes supremes. Instead he pointed to the 2 oracles on his left and right and introduced, "These 2 are the same as me, the God Emperor's patrol envoys, the overseers of the boundless heaven continent. Tianxing, although you are beyond redemption and will die without a doubt, I still have to advise you. But this prince still wants to give you a word of advice. Obediently allow yourself to be captured and stretch out your neck to be executed. Don't wait for us to act, otherwise, you won't even have a complete corpse left. Such a simple sentence, but it contained an intense, tyrannical, killing intent. Clearly, Oracle Xianxia was certain that Ji Tianxing was in his grasp. In his opinion, with him and the 2 oracles present plus Bai Feng, it was enough to take down Ji Tianxing easily. Even if there were any mistakes or mishaps, the other 11 god kings would quickly arrive. They only needed to delay for 2 to 4 hours and they would still be able to kill Ji Tianxing. In short, Ji Tianxing was dead meat. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, with Bai Feng's current state, it's hard to say if she can even stand up, let alone participate in the battle. So, with just the 3 of you, you want to take us down? It's a fool's dream. I remember that among the helpers you gathered, there were not only these 2 oracles, but also many god kings. If I'm not wrong, you are just the vanguard rushing over to stop me. There are also more than 10 god kings on the way to support you, right? Actually, this question was not difficult to guess. However, for Ji Tianxing to say it so openly, it still made Celestial Aspect Emissary feel very awkward. It felt as if Ji Tianxing had seen through him and seen through all his trump cards. Oracle Xianxia was inexplicably panicked and worried. He felt that since Ji Tianxing knew all this and could still remain calm, he must have some trump card. But the 2 oracles Zhang Ying and Ku Yun did not think so much. The 2 oracles sneered, looking confident and domineering. Ha! Traitor, you're not too stupid. You know that you're on the path of no return, right? Little bastard, since you know that you're going to die, why are you still standing there? Kneel down and surrender. Although the 2 oracles had heard from Oracle Xianxia that Ji Tianxing's strength and methods were extraordinary, they must be careful. But they had been oracles for thousands of years and were used to being domineering. They could not change their attitude of looking down on the common people in a short time. At this moment, they only wanted to see Ji Tianxing helplessly and hopelessly kneel down and beg for surrender. But when Oracle Xianxia heard the words of his 2 companions, his face changed and his eyes flashed with deep regret and anger. Damn it! You 2 bastards, can't you tell that he's just trying to trick us? Of course, he only thought about it in his mind and did not dare to say it out loud. After all, Ku Yun and Zhang Ying had the same status as him. Moreover, he had begged Zhang Ying and Ku Yun to help. No matter how angry and dissatisfied he was, Oracle Xianxia did not know how to hold it in. He hurriedly changed the topic, trying to stall for time. But Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and did not waste any more time. If that's the case, then you can go to hell. As he sneered, Ji Tianxing turned into a dazzling golden light and rushed toward Oracle Xianxia. Jiang Tianyi also put away his palace. Together with Jiang Tianxing, he unsheathed his divine sword and attacked. Chapter 3487. Damn it! Seeing this, Divine Ambassador Xianxia really wanted to scold him. Divine Ambassador Zhang Ying and Divine Ambassador Ku Yun were also stunned. Clearly, they did not expect Ji Tianxing to be so ruthless and decisive, directly attacking. However, the 2 of them immediately regained their senses and confidently took out their divine weapons to counterattack. You know that you have nowhere to run, so you still want to struggle? Little bastard, I wanted to let you live for a few more hours, but since you're courting death, we'll fulfill your wish. The 2 divine ambassadors were not afraid at all. They waved their divine spears and divine sabers with all their might, using their ultimate techniques. Swish, 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 swish. Dazzling blades of divine light instantly bloomed in the sky, illuminating the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. Each blade of light contained the power to destroy heaven and earth, as well as many divine Tao laws. Its power was unfathomable. At this moment, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles became dazzling and space became chaotic. Under such circumstances, no one could teleport to escape or dodge. The only thing both sides could do was to go all out and clash. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, a deafening explosion erupted, reverberating endlessly in the sky. The sky for tens of thousands of miles was shattered, and the ground and mountains collapsed, sending smoke and dust into the sky. Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Jiang Tianxing all attacked, using their ultimate techniques. Divine Ambassador Xianxia, Divine Ambassador Zhang Ying, and Ku Yun also did not hold back, using everything they had. The collision of 6 God King experts created a shockwave that could destroy heaven and earth. At the very least, everything within a radius of 20,000 miles was reduced to ruins. Mountains, valleys, and forests no longer existed. There were 7 God Kings present, but only 6 of them participated in the battle. Without a doubt, Bai Feng had turned around and fled into the distance the moment the battle began. Ji Tianxing was right. It was difficult for him to even protect himself now, let alone participate in the battle. Of course, the 6 God Kings participating in the battle were too focused and no one paid attention to him. Kill that little bastard. Xianxia, you boasted about how heaven-defying he is, but from the looks of it he's only SU. In the first round of clashes, neither side was able to gain the upper hand. They could be considered evenly matched. Even though Ji Tianxing's combat power was very strong, surpassing that of any one of the 3 oracles, he was still unable to defeat Ji Tianxing. Jiang Tianyi's battle prowess was not bad, he was on par with Xianxia God Emissary. However, Jiang Tianxing was a hindrance to them. After all, Jiang Tianxing was only a young man in the 5th level of the Divine King realm. Among the 3 God envoys, the weakest 2 were at the 6th level of the Divine King realm. The strongest among them was God Envoy Zhan Ying, who had reached the 7th level of the Divine King realm. Little bastard, hand over your life. Your time of death has come. Accept your fate. After the first exchange, Zhan Ying and Ku Yun both roared and launched a second round of attacks. However, this time the situation in front of them left them a little dumbfounded. Ji Tianxing held a sword in his right hand and a mysterious black tower in his left. After a few flashes of divine light, 2 figures appeared beside him. One of them was a handsome middle-aged God clan man in a long green robe. The other was a monster dozens of feet tall, whose body seemed to be made of stone. Moreover, these 2 figures who had suddenly appeared were both intermediate God Kings. In an instant, Ji Tianxing's side had 5 God Kings. Their combat power had increased by a large margin. Chao Qingyu and Yang, who had just joined the battle, did not say a word of nonsense. In fact, even without Ji Tianxing's order, the 2 of them charged fearlessly towards the 3 God envoys without any regard for their own safety. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were stunned for a moment. Then they unleashed their full strength and charged towards the 3 God envoys. As for Ji Tianxing, he did not wield the sword of burial of heaven to attack. Instead, he pointed the sword at the sky and shouted solemnly, "Sword come!" Instantly, in the distant sky, tens of thousands of stars lit up. Like a dense meteor shower, they rained down in a frenzy. The 3 God envoys felt great pressure and danger. Their hearts tightened. They looked up and saw that there were more than 28,000 star swords. Each star sword was thousands of feet long and contained hundreds of laws and divine power. They were extremely powerful and violent. Not good. Dodge. What kind of monster is this kid? He can summon the stars with a wave of his hand and turn them into tens of thousands of star swords? Damn it. In the end, we underestimated this guy. He seems to have become stronger again. At this moment, shock and fear flashed through the minds of the 3 God envoys, especially God Envoy Xianxia. He felt it the most. He clearly remembered that Ji Tianxing's strength was not so terrifying a few months ago. Although Ji Tianxing could defeat him and severely injure him back then, it was a very difficult victory. But it was different now. Ji Tianxing's every movement was exuding a terrifying pressure that was enough to make him feel terrified and terrified. Wasn't this improvement too terrifying? Rumble. In the next moment, the 28,000 star swords slammed into the ground. The divine powers that the 3 divine envoys had unleashed were instantly shattered into pieces and turned into ashes. Not only that, but their divine power shields also collapsed and exploded into pieces. Most importantly, the 28,000 star swords did not disperse on the spot. They covered a radius of 20,000 miles and formed a huge sword net that sealed off the area. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light crisscrossed and intertwined. In the blink of an eye, a heaven-destroying sword array with a radius of 20,000 miles was formed. An unparalleled suppressive force enveloped the 3 God envoys, making their bodies stiff and difficult to move. Not only were they fearful, but their divine power was also greatly hindered and their combat strength plummeted. This made them feel hopeless. Zhan Ying and Ku Yun looked at each other and saw the horror in each other's eyes. This damned beast. How dare he form an array with a wave of his hand? How arrogant is he? How dare he set up a sword array to seal us 3 god envoys? Generally speaking, only a very powerful person would choose to use an array to fight against a large group of weak people. This way they could kill their opponents faster. If they were of similar strength, this method would not work. But Ji Tianqing had done it. One could imagine how confident Ji Tianqing was. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Soon the heaven-destroying sword array was activated and released more than 10,000 star swords to kill the 3 god envoys. Countless star swords formed a sword net that enveloped the 3 god envoys and forcibly separated them. Countless star swords formed a few hurricanes that wreaked havoc in the sword array. Many more star swords formed a huge sword that could split heaven and earth and slashed at the 3 god envoys. Suddenly, the 3 god envoys were in an extremely dangerous situation. They were forced to retreat in a fluster. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were shocked. The 2 brothers looked at each other and thought at the same time. Oh my god. Young Master Tianxing is not only a top divine blacksmith, but also a master of arrays and swordsmanship? Chapter 3488. Ji Tianxing's craftsmanship had already earned the respect and admiration of the Jiang brothers. Now that the battle had begun, his array and swordsmanship skills were equally unfathomable. The 2 brothers were even more shocked and even fearful. For a supreme being to be proficient in something and reach the pinnacle of it is already a lifetime achievement. But young Master Tianxing seems to be proficient in everything and has reached the pinnacle of it. Is there any justice in this world? In fact, the Jiang brothers were the direct disciples of the ancient clans. They were definitely 1 in a million talents. But after meeting Ji Tianxing they realized how laughable they were. A powerhouse like Ji Tianxing was a true peerless talent. That's not right. He's not a young man, he's a senior. So he can't be called a genius, he can only be called a senior almighty. Thinking of this, the 2 brothers' thoughts became clear. Originally, they were still worried that they could not defeat the 3 divine messengers. But now, with a senior almighty watching over them, what was there to be afraid of? They just had to fight. Kill. Damn divine messengers, eat my sword. The 2 brothers' blood boiled as they waved their swords and attacked the 3 divine messengers. Swoosh, 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 bam, bam, bam. The divine sword radiance that blotted out the sky and the earth, as well as the dazzling divine arts, poured down in torrents, drowning the figures of the 3 divine envoys. Not only were the Jiang brothers working hard, but Chao Qingyu and Yank were also doing their best. Even Ji Tianxing was not idle. He waved his sword and used all sorts of swordsmanship skills to attack. After all, this was his first battle after breaking through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm. He also wanted to use actual combat to test how much his combat power had increased compared to before. Besides, the heaven-vanquishing sword formation was also suppressing the 3 divine messengers. There were also more than 10,000 giant swords that were constantly attacking and killing. The 3 divine messengers were in trouble. The battle had only started for less than 10 breaths, but the 3 divine messengers had already been beaten to a pulp. The first to be injured was Xianxia. He was the first to bear the brunt of Ji Tianxing's attention. Not only were there 3 sword wounds on his body, they were so deep that his bones could be seen and he was dripping with blood. Even his left arm was almost cut off by Ji Tianxing's sword. The second person injured was God Emissary Ku Yun. He was in a more miserable state. After his armor was shattered by the huge swords that filled the sky, there were a few more bloody wounds on his chest and back. Then his left hand was cut off by Jiang Tianyi. This was very humiliating. It was understandable that he was injured by Ji Tianxing. After all, Ji Tianxing had a record of severely injuring Celestial Aspect Emissary and was publicly acknowledged as their #1 enemy. But who was Jiang Tianyi? He had never heard of him before. He was a complete stranger. However, such a young god king with no presence had actually crippled divine emissary Withered Cloud's left palm. How could he not feel aggrieved? Thus, divine emissary Ku Yun was filled with grief and indignation. He no longer focused on Ji Tianxing and instead focused on Jiang Tianyi. If he did not kill this young god king, where would he put his face as a divine emissary? Divine emissary Ku Yun crazily counterattacked Jiang Tianyi. This made Jiang Tianyi very uncomfortable and he was in a precarious situation. However, he was indeed a young talent of the Jiang clan. Even if he was suppressed by divine emissary Ku Yun's crazy aura, he would not be defeated so quickly. In this way it was equivalent to him entangling divine emissary Ku Yun. Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yank targeted Celestial Aspect Emissary. None of the three were a match for Celestial Aspect Emissary. However, with the three of them working together with the Heaven Punishing Sword Array, they naturally had the upper hand against Celestial Aspect Emissary. Celestial Aspect Emissary was beaten to the point of being unable to fight back. Moreover, his injuries continued to worsen. He was so aggrieved and angry that he wanted to vomit blood. As for the strongest divine emissary Shadow Executioner, he was naturally left to Ji Tianxing. That was then and this was now. Not long ago Ji Tianxing was fighting with Bai Feng, who was also in the 7th stage, and it was difficult for him to hold his own. But now his strength had increased by several times. Not to mention Bai Feng, even divine emissary Shadow Executioner was not his match. Rise of the Sword. Sword breaking the 9 heavens. Heavenly Dragon Slash. Starry River Break. Ji Tianxing's left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the Burial of Heaven. His posture was elegant as he continuously used one ultimate move after another. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was beaten until he was dizzy and had almost no strength to fight back. He could only defend with all his might. Even so, thousands of divine giant swords attacked him, making it impossible for him to defend himself. He constantly revealed flaws. Bam. All kinds of muffled sounds were heard as Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner's body kept bursting with dazzling blood. In less than 100 breaths, his chest and back were covered with wounds and dripping with blood. Not long after, Ji Tianxing took advantage of the moment when he was frantically dodging and used the Sword of Annihilation. This ultimate move borrowed the power of the 5 Elements world and was one of Ji Tianxing's ultimate moves. Its power was extremely terrifying. Swish. The giant golden sword slashed down with a loud bang. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner despaired. Kaboom! The divine light he sent out was shattered by the Sword of Annihilation. The shield formed by his divine power and the armor he wore were also shattered by the giant sword. Then he was also sent flying by the divine golden sword. Only a leg was left flying in the sky as blood splattered everywhere. Boom! Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner flew 300 miles and crashed into the ruins. A huge crater was smashed into the ground that looked like ruins and countless cracks appeared around it. Without a doubt, Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was heavily injured and his strength had greatly decreased. Seeing this scene, Divine Emissary Xianxia and Divine Emissary Ku Yun, who were already in a dangerous situation, were filled with fear and despair. Even Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner, who was the strongest, was beaten so miserably. Wouldn't the two of them be doomed? That's right. Xianxia and Ku Yun were indeed doomed. Ji Tianxing took advantage of the moment when Xianxia God Emissary was filled with fear and distraction to teleport behind him. Yes, Ji Tianxing did not chase after Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner but instead charged toward Divine Emissary Xianxia. Of the 3 divine emissaries, he hated Divine Emissary Xianxia the most. All the pursuit, encirclement, and killing that had caused such a huge commotion were all because of Divine Emissary Xianxia. This guy was the main culprit. He must die. Spacetime Blade. Divine Emissary Xianxia only came back to his senses when Ji Tianxing appeared behind him. When Ji Tianxing waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven and thrust out a mysterious black and white sword light, it was too late for him to dodge. At this moment, Divine Emissary Xianxia's face was pale and his eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. This sword light that contained the laws of time and space seemed to freeze space and slow down the flow of time. Under everyone's gaze, it pierced through Divine Emissary Xianxia's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Divine Emissary Xianxia's head exploded and blood splattered all over the sky. Of course, there were also more than 20 quintessence shards that floated down from the sky. Divine Emissary Xianxia, who was at the 6th level Divine King realm, was killed by Ji Tianxing just like that. Instant kill at the critical moment. Chapter 3489. The headless corpse of the Stellar Aspect Ambassador fell into the ruins, accompanied by a sky full of blood. Not far away, the 2 god ambassadors Zhang and Ku Yun witnessed this scene with their own eyes and were stunned. Especially God Ambassador Zhang. Originally, Ji Tianxing attacked him fiercely as if he would not stop until he killed him. But only now did he realize that Ji Tianxing was creating a diversion. On the surface, it looked like Ji Tianxing was attacking him aggressively. But in reality, Ji Tianqing had been staring at the Stellar Aspect Ambassador. He was waiting. He was waiting for a fleeting opportunity to finish off the Celestial Aspect Messenger. And it was a one-hit kill. And now Ji Tianqing had done it. The Stellar Aspect Ambassador had fallen. This kid is so scheming. He's too despicable. The same thought flashed through the minds of God Ambassador Zhenying and God Ambassador Ku Yun. Subsequently, the killing intent and fighting spirit that filled their hearts instantly dissipated like ice and snow under the scorching sun. Originally, the three God Ambassadors could have held on for a while even if they were heavily injured. They could have held on for another 2 hours, waiting for the 11 God Kings to arrive. As long as they waited for the 11 God Kings, it would be worth it no matter how serious their injuries were. But their plans and illusions were shattered. After the Stellar Aspect Ambassador died, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and put away the divine spark fragment of the Stellar Aspect Ambassador. Then he waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven again and charged at the God Ambassador Zhenying like a meteor. This time his aura was even more ferocious. The God Ambassador Zhenying's fighting spirit disappeared, and so did his confidence. He was instantly terrified. He was already injured by Ji Tianqing and his aura was crushed by Ji Tianqing. Defeat was inevitable. Swish, swish, bang, bang, bang. Dazzling and eye-catching sword light poured down like a torrential flood. The God Ambassador Zhenying did not have time to think and could only defend with all his might. Unfortunately, he had blocked Ji Tianqing's ferocious attacks, but he had not been able to block the violent attacks of the heaven-destroying sword formation. At least dozens of divine giant swords struck him, causing him to spit out blood and tumble back. Shadow Executioner God Representative's injuries worsened once again, and his strength dropped drastically. After flying backward for 150 kilometers, his confidence was completely shattered. His eyes, which had been burning with a raging fighting spirit, had become dull and lifeless. The thought of retreating rose in his heart. No, we can't continue fighting like this. Ku Yun and I won't be able to hold on for so long. Before the reinforcements arrive, we will be killed by Tianqing. He had to escape. Xianxia is already dead. We have to survive no matter what. After making up his mind, the Shadow Executioner envoy did not launch a counterattack. Instead, he turned around and rushed to the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. He only wanted to shake off Ji Tianqing, break through the heaven-destroying sword formation as soon as possible, and escape from this place. Moreover, he had the qualifications and trump cards to do so. On the other side, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were also in high spirits as they attacked God Representative Ku Yun together. God Representative Ku Yun was so depressed and aggrieved that he almost vomited blood. The moment God Representative Xianxia was killed, he had a premonition that he would be in trouble. However, he had never imagined that his opponent would be so shameless. Ji Tianqing went to deal with the Shadow Executioner envoy, while the remaining 4 God Kings all attacked him fiercely. Wasn't this too unreasonable? The Shadow Executioner envoy is clearly stronger, 1 level higher than me. He is your #1 enemy, your target to kill. Do you all have to kill me? Do you think I'm easy to bully? Do you want to pick on the weak? However, no matter how angry God Representative Ku Yun was, it was useless. When the 4 God Kings arrived in front of him, he could only muster his strength and resist with all his might. However, it was futile. He had indeed blocked Chao Qingyu and Jiang Tianqing's attacks. However, he had not been able to block Jiang Tianyi and Yang's violent attacks. Then tragedy befell him. Boom, 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 boom. With a deafening explosion, Divine Emissary Ku Yun was sent flying back, his body covered in blood. His left arm had been completely severed, and his right leg had been severed from the middle, splinters flying everywhere. God Representative Ku Yun's fate was tragic. After suffering such heavy injuries, his strength had dropped by at least 30%. However, this was not the worst. Ji Tianqing, who was not far away, had wanted to use this opportunity to chase after the Shadow Executioner envoy. However, the Shadow Executioner envoy had made up his mind. He had no intention of fighting back, nor did he have any intention of dealing with him. He turned and fled toward the edge of the sword formation. This left Ji Tianqing speechless. The battle had just begun, and the 2 sides had only exchanged a few blows, yet he was in such a hurry to escape? Who would have thought that he was such a cowardly God King? Ji Tianxing saw that chasing after the Shadow Executioner envoy would definitely take some time and effort. After all, no matter how cowardly the Shadow Executioner envoy was, he was still a true God King. However, the nearby God representative Ku Yun had just been sent flying by Jiang Tianyi's group of 4, missing an arm and a leg. This was an excellent opportunity. In any case, he would kill whoever he killed sooner or later. In that case, he would kill God representative Ku Yun first. It was decided then. Thus, Ji Tianxing used his teleportation ability again and appeared behind God representative Ku Yun like a ghost. Poor God representative Ku Yun had just stabilized himself and did not even have time to check his injuries. All of a sudden, a sword light as dazzling as the sun shone behind him. Apocalypse sword. It was the Apocalypse sword again. In any case, the 5 elements world was very powerful now, and the world energy it provided was terrifying. When the sword descended, God representative Ku Yun immediately despaired. He looked on helplessly as the golden sword light continued to grow larger and larger in his eyes. He wanted to dodge, but he could not. He wanted to block, but he could not erupt with much divine power, and it was too late. Crack. In the next instant, the dazzling golden light engulfed God representative Ku Yun. When the giant divine sword struck him, there was a loud sound like ice shattering. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang all watched as God representative Ku Yun was cleaved in half by the giant sword. Then the 2 halves of the corpse collapsed and exploded, spraying thousands of pieces of debris. God representative Ku Yun had also fallen. His fate was even worse than God representative Xianxia's, his body exploding into pieces that scattered across the ruins. The god head was also chopped into pieces. More than 20 fragments flew out and drifted down in the night sky. This scene was just as shocking as God representative Xianxia's death. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing both widened their eyes. Shock flashed through their eyes and their nerves were stretched taut. At the same time, their doubts about Ji Tianxing's strength were greatly dispelled. After all, Ji Tianxing had killed 2 opponents in a row in a short span of 10 breaths. Whether it was God representative Xianxia or God representative Ku Yun, they were both genuine mid-level God Kings. Moreover, they were both at the 6th level of the God King realm, one of the best amongst mid-level God Kings. If someone said that Ji Tianxing was not a high-level God King, who would believe them? Only a high-level God King would have such terrifying means. Chapter 3490. After killing God emissary Ku Yun, Ji Tianxing put away his God head fragment as usual. At this moment, there was only one target left in the heaven-destroying sword formation. God emissary Shadow Executioner. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing and the others also woke up from their shock. Everyone also realized that 2 of the 3 emissaries had been killed, and only God emissary Shadow Executioner was left. Then God emissary Shadow Executioner's death had come. Thinking of this, everyone turned their heads to the north of the heaven-destroying sword formation. But the scene in front of them shocked them and their expressions became very strange. This God emissary Shadow Executioner, who was the strongest, had not participated in the battle. Even when God emissary Ku Yun was killed, he had no intention of helping. He actually put away his divine weapon and took out a divine hairpin that was hundreds of meters long. That's right. It was obviously a hairpin used by women, but it exuded a powerful aura. God emissary Shadow Executioner did not counterattack. Instead, he went into the hairpin and pushed the hairpin's power to the extreme, exploding with the fastest speed possible as he slammed into the edge of the sword formation. He was running away. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the others were very anxious. Everyone rushed toward the hairpin, wanting to stop God emissary Shadow Executioner. But unfortunately, the 2 sides were more than 8,000 miles apart. Even if they teleported, it would take an instant. There was not enough time. Unless the heaven-destroying sword formation could withstand the impact of the hairpin. The heaven-destroying sword formation was made up of 28,000 giant swords. Half of the giant swords surrounded the formation, forming a light wall that covered the sky. The other half of the giant swords were inside the sword formation, forming a hurricane, a sword net and a vortex. That seemingly thick light wall that covered the sky might not be able to withstand the impact of the hairpin. Kaboom! In the next moment, the hairpin hit the light wall of the sword formation like a shooting star. A deafening sound exploded in the sword formation, echoing through the sky. Following the explosion, A huge gap appeared in the dazzling light wall, and thousands of pieces of debris flew out. In addition, cracks also extended out from the gap that was 1,000 feet wide. The entire heaven-destroying sword formation shook and swayed along with it, its energy fluctuating chaotically. In the end, the heaven-destroying sword array was unable to block the sky-piercing hairpin and was broken through by the Shadow Executioner envoy. Shua. Amidst the debris and starlight, the sky-piercing hairpin passed through the gap and escaped from the heaven-destroying sword formation. Then Shadow Executioner's pressure was greatly reduced, and he revealed a smile of having survived a disaster. He knew he had successfully escaped. He wouldn't die. Swish. The Shadow Executioner did not hesitate at all. After escaping from the heaven-destroying sword formation, he activated the space-piercing hairpin and cut through the night sky at his fastest speed, heading straight for the north. That was right. He fled to the north. It was in the opposite direction of Ji Tianxing and the others. At the same time, it was also where the 11 God Kings' reinforcements were coming from. Swish. In the blink of an eye, the space-piercing hairpin had flown 5,000 miles away from the heaven-destroying sword formation. At this time, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing and the rest had just reached the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. They had also passed through the gap in the sword formation and chased into the sky outside. Looking in the direction that the space-piercing hairpin had escaped in, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing instinctively gave chase. They also exploded with their fastest speed, chasing after the space-piercing hairpin. Chao Qingyu and Yank were not idle either. They were also desperately chasing after him. However, Ji Tianxing stood in the sky and raised his hand to stop them. There's no need to chase. It's a waste of effort. You won't be able to catch up. Chao Qingyu's expression froze and he revealed a bitter smile. Yes. The divine weapon of Shadow Executioner should be a king-level upper divine weapon, right? Yank scratched his head and said unwillingly, "Are we just going to watch him escape like this? I can't accept this." Ji Tianxing was more indifferent. He said calmly, "After all, we are not peak God Kings. We can't control everything and we can't stop Shadow Executioner from escaping. Furthermore, looking at the direction that he escaped in, he should have other intentions. If I'm not wrong, they still have a large group of God King reinforcements rushing over from the north. If we chase after them, it won't be long before we bump into that group of God Kings." Naturally, there was no need to say the rest. If they bumped into that group of God Kings, it was obvious what the outcome would be. Chao Qingyu was inexplicably worried. He asked, "Young master, should we inform those 2 God Kings to stop chasing?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, "There's no need. They will be back soon." Seeing that he was so confident, Chao Qingyu and Yank had nothing to worry about. As expected, Ji Tianxing had guessed correctly. After a short 30 breaths, the 2 brothers Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing returned, panting. Their eyes were somewhat dim and their expressions were filled with unwillingness and anger. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yank already knew the result, so they did not ask. However, Jiang Tianxing was filled with indignation. He could not help but curse, "Damn it! That guy escaped too quickly. If not for that superior king-level divine weapon, we definitely would not have let him escape." Jiang Tianyi did not say anything, but he smiled helplessly. Ji Tianxing comforted him, "It's okay. After this attack, they won't be able to stop us for a long time." Jiang Tianyi thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Yes. They had a total of 3 divine messengers. Young Master Tianxing killed 2 of them. Divine Messenger Zhan Ying, who escaped, was also heavily injured. He won't be able to recover in a short period of time. In this way, the God Kings will be like dragons without a leader and will not be much of a threat. At this moment, Ji Tianxing suddenly turned his head and looked to the side of the heaven-destroying sword formation. When he saw a ball of divine light silently flying towards the east, his lips curled into a playful smile. I was only focused on chasing after the 3 divine messengers and forgot about him." Chao Qingyu, Yank and the Jiang brothers all turned their heads to look and discovered that within that ball of divine light was the exhausted divine king White Phoenix. The 4 of them immediately revealed gloating and malicious smiles. We forgot about divine king White Phoenix. Tisk tsk. I didn't expect that guy to hide outside the sword formation and not escape. I reckon he still doesn't know what happened inside the sword formation, and even more doesn't know that Ku Yun and Divine Messenger Xianxia are dead. As they spoke, everyone followed Ji Tianqing and flew towards that ball of divine light. Even though White Phoenix was a superior divine king and usually came and went like the wind as fast as the aurora. But it was different now. He was extremely weak and tired. His flying speed was extremely slow. Furthermore, he sensed that Ji Tianqing and the rest were not far away. He was afraid of alerting them and could only escape silently. In this way his speed was even slower. But even so he still could not escape from Ji Tianqing's palms. After a short 30 breaths, Ji Tianqing led Chao Qingyu, Zhang Tianyi, and the rest to block Divine King White Phoenix's path. Chapter 3491. If you want to kill me, do as you please. Under the night sky, Divine King White Phoenix stubbornly raised his head and closed his eyes. He did not look at the expressions of the people around him. His pale and weak face was filled with arrogance and unyieldingness. Even though he knew that he was destined to not be able to escape tonight. If he fell into Ji Tianqing's hands he would definitely die. However, he was an upper-level divine king, a renowned ruler of a region. Even if he were to die, he would die with an unyielding spirit and an air of arrogance. He would not bow and scrape. However, the butcher's knife did not descend as he expected. Zhang Tianyi, Zhang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yang surrounded him. They crossed their arms and looked on coldly. Their expressions were somewhat mocking but no one made a move. Ji Tianqing also looked at him coldly but did not make a move. After a short silence, Divine King White Phoenix opened his eyes. He looked around and then his gaze fell on Ji Tianqing. Why didn't you kill me? Ji Tianqing looked at him and raised his eyebrows. He asked, why should I kill you? Do you want to die? Bai Feng frowned and a self-mocking cold smile appeared on his face. He said in a low voice, I served the 3 divine envoys and followed them to kill you. Don't you have the right to kill me? Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head lightly. He said, strictly speaking, you and I don't have any deep grudges. When we first fought, you were only following the orders of divine envoy Xianxia. This time you were just watching the battle and did not attack me at all. To be more precise, you're just leading the way. Leading the way. Bai Feng frowned again and his expression was a little strange. Ji Tianqing maintained his smile and looked at the third eye on his forehead. He said, if not for the Phoenix clan's eye of annihilation, how would the 3 divine envoys know where I was? If not for your guidance, they would still be guarding the Heaven Dragon Pass in the Red Dragon region. How could they appear here? Bai Feng's tightly furrowed brows relaxed. Her face was filled with vigilance and wariness as she asked, so, you didn't kill me because of my divine eye of annihilation? You want me to pledge my loyalty to you and work for you? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said blandly, the Annihilation Divine Eye is indeed a special inheritance of the Phoenix kind and I can't have it. But if I want to cultivate the Divine Eye secret technique, there is an eye technique even more miraculous than the Divine Eye of Annihilation. As for your loyalty, I won't force you. It's all up to you. I won't kill you. Firstly, there is no deep hatred between us. Secondly, you are a disciple of the Phoenix clan. Bai Feng frowned again. After pondering for a moment she asked, are you afraid of the Phoenix clan's power? No. You even dared to kill the oracle and offend the God Emperor. Why would you be afraid of offending the Phoenix clan? When everyone heard this, the Jiang brothers were already somewhat impatient. Jiang Tianxing in particular said unhappily, Bai Feng, are you a blockhead? Mr. Tianxing is a senior expert of our Jiang clan, 1 generation higher than our clan leader. Do you think he would be afraid of the Phoenix clan? He loves the clan because he loves the clan. He doesn't want to see the clans killing each other. Moreover, as a disciple of the clan, you don't think about how to restore the glory of the clan. Instead, you work for the oracle. You are a disgrace to the clan's disciples. Zhang Tianyi also nodded in agreement. He said earnestly, Divine King Bai Feng, although you and I don't have any relationship, we don't even know each other. But we have all heard of each other's names, right? Whether you admit it or not, the 18 ancient clans should unite and fight against this era together. At least we should have the pride and glory of our clan. How can we bow and scrape before the God Emperor? Bow and scrape before the God Emperor? Bai Feng raised her eyebrows and a mocking expression appeared on her face. She sneered and said, which of the 18 ancient clans didn't submit to the God Emperor? Isn't this bowing and scrape before the God Emperor? No. Jiang Tianxing clenched his fists and roared hot-bloodedly, that's not submission. It's a temporary compromise to preserve our strength. But as long as the 18 ancient clans are united, we won't be disintegrated. Bai Feng sneered again and said in a playful tone, "Wake up all of you. Don't immerse yourself in the glory of the past and lose yourself. Since 1,000 years ago the world and era have changed. 1,000 years ago and even the entire ancient era the great clans looked down on the world. But now it's the era of the God Emperor. No one can stop him. Even if the 18 ancient clans unite, it's impossible to fight against the God Emperor. It's like throwing an egg against a rock. Because you stubborn frogs in a well can't imagine how great and terrifying the God Emperor is." When Bai Feng said this she raised her head and looked at the sky. Her eyes were filled with respect and worship. Seeing her expression, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing clenched their fists. Their hearts surged with anger. "Bastard, you've forgotten your ancestors. Don't forget your identity as a disciple of the Phoenix clan." The ancient clans had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. They were once the top forces of the God realm and looked down on the common people. So, every disciple of the ancient clans had their own honor and pride. Even after 1,000 years this pride had never disappeared. But the Jiang brothers didn't understand. How could Bai Feng change so completely? Ji Tianxing saw through the clues and frowned at Bai Feng. He asked, "You've seen the Azura God Emperor with your own eyes, right?" Bai Feng was stunned. Frowning, she thought carefully for a moment before shaking her head. "No, I haven't. With my status and strength, I don't have the right to see the true face of the God Emperor. Even on the day of the Domain Lord's appointment, I only saw the projection of the Azura God Emperor's clone." After saying this she looked at Ji Tianxing with a serious expression and said, "Tianxing, I'll say the same thing. Accept your fate and give up on your unrealistic fantasies. The strength of the God Emperor has long surpassed the God King realm and stands at the peak of the divine Tao. You've never seen him so you can't imagine how terrifying he is. Even if the 18 ancient clans were to join forces, they wouldn't be able to touch the God Emperor, let alone you." Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows thoughtfully. The Azura God Emperor has taken the last step and surpassed the God King realm to reach the peak of the divine Tao. Could it be that he has understood the secret of eternal life and has mastered the heavenly Tao? Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing didn't think much of it. The two brothers looked at each other angrily. "Seventh brother, I can't hold it in anymore. I really want to beat him up." "Me too." "Then, let's do it." The two brothers exchanged their opinions. Then they smiled angrily and raised their fists and legs. In the next moment Bai Feng felt her vision go black as a storm of attacks came down on her. Bam, bam, bam. After a series of violent and dull punches and kicks Bai Feng, who was already very weak, was beaten black and blue. She fainted on the spot. Ji Tianxing also felt bored. He waved his hand and said, "Tie her up and take her away." Chapter 3492. Jiang Tianyi controlled the palace and flew across the sky as fast as lightning towards the south. Jiang Tianxing was recuperating in a secret chamber. Ji Tianxing also occupied a secret chamber. He took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and entered the distorted spacetime to cultivate. He wasn't injured in the previous battle and didn't use much divine power. However, he had to refine Celestial Body and Divine Envoy Ku Yun's Godhead fragments as soon as possible to increase his strength. Chao Qingyu and Yank didn't need to be mentioned. After entering the palace, the two of them returned to the divine worship and the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda to heal their injuries. There was only silence in the temporary imperial residence. Only Bai Feng was still unconscious. She was lying unconscious in the palace. After he was knocked out by the Jiang brothers, everyone worked together to use divine powers to seal his divine power and godhead. This way Bai Feng would have to sleep for a long time before waking up. Even if he woke up he would be like an ordinary person and wouldn't be able to use his divine power and divine sense. He was basically no threat. Originally, with Jiang Tianxing's personality, he wanted to kill Bai Feng to vent his anger. In his eyes, Bai Feng was a servile and spineless traitor. Not only did he betray the Phoenix clan, but he also betrayed the 18 ancient clans. However, Jiang Tianyi thought about it and stopped Jiang Tianxing. He could tell that Ji Tianxing didn't have the intention to kill Bai Feng. Perhaps there was another reason for leaving Bai Feng alive. Since it was Ji Tianxing's intention, Jiang Tianxing naturally wouldn't disobey and let Bai Feng go. Next, the palace rushed toward the God's Guide Grotto Heaven in the south at the fastest speed. A few hours later, in the central region of the Hongshan Empire, the disheveled divine envoy Shadow Executioner panted as he flew over a mountain range. His clothes and hair were drenched and his body was covered in blood. He looked rather miserable. For the past 4 hours he had been using the sky-piercing hairpin to escape with all his might. However, using the sky-piercing hairpin consumed a huge amount of divine power. Shadow Executioner Shadow was already injured and his strength had decreased. He had only held on for 4 hours, but he could no longer hold on. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi didn't chase after him. Shadow Executioner hairpin and slowed down. At this moment, in the northern sky, a dazzling divine light galloped over. Still thousands of miles away, divine emissary Shadow Executioner discovered that there was a divine warship within the divine light. Coincidentally, he recognized that divine warship. It was the divine ship that the 11 God Kings were on. Stop. Divine envoy Shadow Executioner hurriedly rushed forward, waving his arms as he shouted in a low and hoarse voice. The God King controlling the divine warship immediately discovered divine envoy Shadow Executioner and recognized him. Thus, the divine warship quickly decelerated and stopped in midair. Swoosh. Swish swish swish. After the cabin door of the divine ship opened, 10 divine kings appeared one after another and flew to the side of divine envoy Shadow Executioner. Seeing divine envoy Shadow Executioner in such a miserable state, all the divine kings were stunned, their faces filled with disbelief. Sir Messenger, what happened to you? Shadow Executioner, how did you suffer such heavy injuries? What about the other 2 divine envoys? Why are you alone? What the hell is going on? Are we late? The 10 divine kings were shocked, anxious, and confused. Divine envoy Shadow Executioner looked around and saw that no one was gloating, mocking, or joking. Only then did he relax slightly. He waved his hand and said in a low voice, "This is not the place to talk. Let's return to the divine worship first." The divine kings hurriedly nodded in agreement. Yes. Sir Messenger, quickly return to the divine worship to rest. Sir Messenger, please. Soon, everyone returned to the main hall of the divine worship. Divine envoy Shadow Executioner sat at the head and took 2 king-level divine pills, silently circulating his energy to suppress his injuries. The 10 divine kings all stood in the main hall, looking at him with concern. 15 minutes later, divine envoy Shadow Executioner's injuries stabilized. He then said, "This envoy and 2 other divine envoys stopped those traitors at the southern border of the Hongshan Empire. I didn't expect that those traitors had the help of the Jiang clan and were so powerful. We fought a great battle and injured those traitors and the Jiang clan disciples. Unfortunately, the 2 divine envoys Xianxia and Ku Yun were killed by the traitor Tianxing." Divine envoy Shadow Executioner's voice was low, filled with pain and anger. When the 10 divine kings heard this, they were stunned. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. The 2 divine envoys were killed? How is this possible? The strength of those renegades is actually formidable to such an extent? It's over. The 2 divine envoys were killed. Who else can kill those traitors? Divine envoy Shadow Executioner, why don't you send an order to Heaven Dragon Pass and gather all the divine kings so that we can work together to kill those traitors? Yes. Since those renegades are so powerful, we have to work together. Only then will we be absolutely safe. Every divine king felt a strong sense of danger. They were nervous and worried. Before they came, everyone was full of confidence. Now they were not confident and were filled with fear. Divine envoy Shadow Executioner thought for a moment and nodded. Those traitors will definitely continue south. With our current manpower, we may not be able to kill them. I will immediately send a message to Heaven Dragon Pass and gather all the divine kings. Even if the 2 divine envoys were sacrificed, we cannot give up on killing them. No matter what, we must kill those traitors to appease the souls of the 2 divine envoys. The 10 divine kings nodded in agreement. Divine envoy Shadow Executioner frowned and thought for a moment. He waved his hand and said, "All right, everyone leave. I need a secret room." The divine kings quickly left. One of them came forward and arranged a secret room for him. After a moment, Divine envoy Shadow Executioner entered the secret room to heal his injuries. All the divine kings left. The secret room was dimly lit and silent. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner was not in a hurry to heal. He first took out a communication jade slip and sent an order to Heaven Dragon Pass. Then he frowned and muttered to himself. This assassination not only mobilized more than 30 divine kings, it also alarmed more than 20 regions. Xianxia and Kuyun are dead. There is no news of divine king Baifeng. She was probably killed by those traitors. This matter not only implicated the Feng clan, but also the Jiang clan's disciples. Such an important matter will probably spread to the various regions very quickly. There is no way to hide or cover it up. It seems that I can only report the truth to His Majesty the God Emperor and let His Majesty the God Emperor make the decision. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner came to this decision after careful consideration. Before this he had the same idea as Ku Yun and Divine Envoy Xianxia. A traitor like Ji Tianxing had appeared in the boundless heaven continent. They wanted to kill Ji Tianxing and the others before the matter got out of hand. Only then could they answer to His Majesty the God Emperor and not show their incompetence. But now the matter had gotten out of hand and was beyond their ability to handle. Not to mention the region masters, even Xianxia and Divine Envoy Ku Yun were killed. He did not dare to hide it anymore. He could only ask Azura God Emperor. Chapter 3493. After thinking for a while, Shadow Executioner God Emissary took out a communication jade slip. He reported the cause, process and result of the entire matter in detail, including the 2 Jiang clan disciples participating in the battle and the disappearance of White Phoenix Divine King. As a god emissary who patrolled the world, he naturally knew the strength of the 18 ancient clans, as well as the relationship between the ancient clans and the God Emperor. This level of conflict and confrontation was not something he could decide. It had to be handled by the God Emperor. Of course, Shadow Executioner God Emissary temporarily did not have the qualifications to directly send a message to the Azura God Emperor. This communication jade slip was for the patrol commander. That's right. The 49 patrol commanders were directly under the 2 commanders. The 2 patrol commanders were the Azura God Emperor's trusted aides and right-hand men. Only they had the qualifications to meet the God Emperor. Especially Vice Commander Jin Shuang, who guarded the God Emperor's palace and the living being altar all year round, receiving news from the various regions. Whoosh! A golden light flashed. The communication jade slip flew out of the divine ship and disappeared into the sky. After sending the message, Shadow Executioner God Emissary let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the sky outside the window and muttered to himself, although the God Emperor will definitely severely punish me when he finds out about this. This matter will also become a failure in my life. But Ku Yun and Xianxia were sacrificed. Only I survived. This is already a great fortune. As for those traitors, their time of death has come. Soon everything will be over. After saying this, Shadow Executioner God Emissary finally felt relieved. He collected his thoughts and began to heal himself. In the center of the boundless heaven continent, there was a blessed land that ordinary people didn't know about. It was located high up in the sky. This was a small world and also the most sacred and dignified place in the boundless heaven continent, because this was the Azura God Emperor's cave residence. The famous God Emperor's palace that only existed in legends was within this blessed land. At this time, Vice Commander Jin Shuang was guarding the living being altar as usual, waiting to receive news from the various regions at any time. For the past few hundred years he had been repeating the same routine. It was dull and tedious. Fortunately he could still cultivate while guarding the living altar. He only needed to deal with it when there was news from the living being's altar. However, today was different. While he was cultivating, nothing happened to the sage's altar. However, a beam of golden light descended from the sky. Shwa! The golden light dissipated, revealing a special communication jade slip. Jin Shuang glanced at it and recognized that it was the special communication jade slip used by the inspectors. Which patrol envoy sent this? Could it be that there's a problem in one of the domains? This thought flashed through Jin Shuang's mind. She reached out and picked up the jade slip, reading the information inside. A moment later he finished reading the contents of the jade slip and was stunned. His expression became dignified and angry, and his eyes flashed with a biting cold killing intent. Damn it! Zhang Ying is such an idiot. How could he wait until now to report such a big incident? Jin Shuang's fists were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Her entire body was bursting with anger and killing intent. If the shadow executioner was in front of him, he would definitely beat him up. However, Jin Shuang took a deep breath and quickly suppressed the anger in her heart. He realized the seriousness of the matter and didn't dare to act on his own. He hurriedly flew to the god palace 100 li away. 100 breaths later, he knocked on the door of a secret room and saw a middle-aged god race wearing scarlet red armor. He was tall and sturdy and had a domineering aura. "Lord Commander, I am very sorry to disturb your secluded cultivation. However, just now the shadow executioner reported a very serious matter to me. You must take a look." Jin Shuang looked at the cold and dignified middle-aged god race sitting on the god jade throne. He bowed and said in a serious tone. This middle-aged god race wearing scarlet red armor was the commander of the 49 inspectors, one of the Azura God Emperor's right-hand men. His strength had long reached the 9th layer of the Divine King realm, Qian. Although there was only a difference of one word between the commander and the deputy commander. However, there was still a huge gap between their statuses. Otherwise, Qian wouldn't be able to freely stay in the secret room and cultivate. On the other hand, Jin Shuang could only guard the living being's altar year after year. Qian didn't speak. He only nodded and reached out to take the communication jade slip from Jin Shuang. His divine sense entered the jade slip. The shadow executioner's low voice immediately sounded in Qian's mind. After hearing a few words, Qian's brow furrowed and his face became as cold as ice. After a while, Qian finished listening to the shadow executioner's report and retracted his divine sense. His face was cold and his body emitted a cold killing intent. He sneered, "In almost 1,000 years, there has never been such a big matter. A few daring traitors wantonly killing those domain lords is one thing. But even the Jiang clan of the god attraction Grotto Heaven is involved? Haha, those 18 ancient clans after keeping a low profile for 1,000 years, are they finally going to bare their fangs?" Jin Shuang nodded in agreement and said in a firm tone, "Back then they were cowards not daring to fight against the God Emperor. It's laughable that they thought that with 1,000 years of patience and accumulation, they had the qualifications to challenge the God Emperor. However, they will never be able to imagine just how powerful His Majesty the God Emperor has become." Qi Yan nodded slightly and said in a cold voice, "In the past 1,000 years the ancient clans have been very docile. Even the God Emperor couldn't find a reason to exterminate them. Now this is the perfect opportunity. The God Emperor can start with the Jiang clan and then eliminate the other clans one by one. But unfortunately, the God Emperor has already left the God realm and went to the outer realms to comprehend the Great Tao. This matter can only be handled by us." Jin Shuang knew that the Azura God Emperor hadn't shown himself for 1,000 years and was most likely in secluded cultivation. But he didn't expect the Azura God Emperor to leave the God realm. He thought to himself, "Qi Yan knows where the God Emperor went but I don't. Is this the difference between our statuses?" Although his heart was a bit sour, he didn't show it on his face and cupped his hands. "Commander, please give me your instructions." Qi Yan frowned and thought for a moment, then said in a serious tone, "This matter isn't too big but it isn't small either. If it doesn't involve the ancient clans, you just need to take people to kill those traitors and the matter will be resolved. However, since it involves the ancient clans, you still need to be careful. How about this? I need to guard the God Emperor's palace and listen to the orders of the God Emperor, so I can't go out. You can personally take people to kill those traitors. If necessary, you can mobilize all the domain lords and godly kings. As for the ancient clans, for now we should focus on suppressing them. It's not good to directly fight them." Without a doubt, Qi Yan gave this difficult task to Jin Shuang. Jin Shuang held his breath, but on the surface he couldn't refute and could only follow orders. Chapter 3494. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. The Palace of Heavens had long left the Hengshan region and crossed over a region. Ever since that battle and the death of the two divine envoys, the journey had been peaceful. No one dared to intercept the Palace of Heaven's will. Even though the journey was peaceful, Jiang Tianyi did not dare to be careless. He knew that divine envoy Shadow Executioner would not let the matter rest. He would definitely gather more divine envoys and divine kings to intercept the Palace of Heaven's will. Therefore Jiang Tianyi was always tense. He only had one goal now. That was to return to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven as soon as possible and bring Ji Tianxing back to the Jiang clan. As long as he completed this mission, he would have no more worries. As for whether Ji Tianxing's killing of the 2 divine envoys would incur the God Emperor's wrath and be personally hunted down by the God Emperor, this was not in his consideration at all. In any case, he was like all the other Jiang clan disciples. He did not have much respect for the Azure God Emperor. At the same time, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for 2 years. In these 2 years he had refined Xianxia and Divine Envoy Ku Yun's Divine Spark fragments. Not only had his skills improved greatly, but his strength had also increased by 2 times. The number of divine Dao laws he had mastered had also increased by a few dozen. He was not far from 500. After refining the Divine Spark fragments, Ji Tianxing did not remain idle. He continued to cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art. As his strength increased, his understanding of the heaven-punishing divine art also deepened. He had already thought about how to cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art after breaking through to the intermediate Divine King level. His current goal was to recover to the 4th level of the Divine King realm before entering the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. Once he became an intermediate Divine King, it would be easier for him to do things after entering the Jiang clan. On the other side, Yang was also cultivating in seclusion under the Bloody Flame Sacred Tree. After 2 years of recuperation, his injuries had long since recovered. Now he was cultivating diligently to improve his strength. Not only Yang but Yunyao, Jiku, Bailong and the others were also cultivating under the sacred tree. Everyone's strength and realm were constantly increasing. Only Yunyao was in an awkward situation. She had long reached the peak of the God Monarch realm, but she still could not see any hope of breaking through to the God King realm. While this made her feel depressed, it also confirmed Ji Tianxing's conjecture. Most likely she would need to fuse with the 7th Divine Pearl before she could break through to the God King realm. The first 2 months of their journey were peaceful and quiet. Not only was there no one intercepting the Palace of Heaven's will, there wasn't even anyone following them. Just like that, the Palace of Heaven's will successfully crossed 4 regions. However, 60 days later, when the Palace of Heaven's will entered the 5th region, Jiang Tianyi felt that something was wrong. This place was called the Yuanshan region, located in the south of the Boundless Heaven continent. It was not far from the South Wind region where the Divine Attraction Cave was located. There was only one region between them. In other words, Jiang Tianyi would be able to bring Ji Tianxing back to the Jiang clan in at most a month. However, after entering the Yuanshan region, Jiang Tianyi faintly felt that he was being watched. Even though there was no abnormal situation around the Palace of Heaven's will. He used his divine sense to investigate many times but did not discover any experts approaching. However, the feeling of being watched like a thorn in his back always lingered around him. Jiang Tianyi had a premonition that the revenge that should come would come soon. In the past 2 months, I also asked the Jiang clan spies and my friends in the Shimi Cave Heaven to inquire about various news. From their feedback, it seems that the Shadow Executioner emissary did not do much. He only gathered more than 20 God Kings and continued to chase south. There should still be some distance between them and us. Even if he sent scouts and spies to keep an eye on our whereabouts. As long as he and those God Kings do not catch up to us, there is nothing to worry about. Thinking of this, the sense of urgency in Jiang Tianyi's heart lessened by a lot. But it was a pity. As the days passed, the uneasy feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. Jiang Tianyi had a strong premonition. The people secretly following him might not be the Shadow Executioner emissary's spies. Moreover, this group of people should not be waiting for long and would soon appear and take action. As expected, reality proved that Jiang Tianyi's guess was correct. 13 days later, just as Tianyi Palace was about to leave the Yuanshan region, several God King experts suddenly appeared, blocking the palace's path. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Those were 6 God race experts. The person in the lead was an old man in a purple robe with white hair and a beard. This person was skinny and had a dark face, but his eyes were bright and full of spirit. His entire body exuded an arrogant and domineering aura. Most importantly, this purple-robed old man was a high God King. Following behind the purple-robed old man were 3 God King experts in different attire. One of them was a tall and muscular old man in a gray robe with 6 wings. He was also a high God King. The other two middle-aged god race experts also had dignified appearances and extraordinary auras. Their strength was at the 6th level of the God King realm, but they were in peak condition only a step away from the High God King realm. Other than these 4 god kings, Jiang Tianyi's gaze landed on the 5th person. It was a young god race expert wearing a white robe, his hair tied up in a bun. He looked very handsome. His appearance was very familiar, but his face was filled with a mocking sneer, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. The 6th person was beside the young god race expert. Jiang Tianyi was also familiar with him. When he saw this person's face, Jiang Tianyi was stunned. Qinlan, Benchengao, why is it you? Without a doubt. The 6 god kings who appeared to block Tianyi Palace were all experts of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Based on their attire and appearance, Jiang Tianyi immediately guessed their identities. Left Guardian Qin Dong, 2nd Elder Su Zhang, 6th Elder Gu Shi, and 7th Elder Lu Qingsong of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Without much thought, Jiang Tianyi immediately guessed the reason. After Qinlan and Yan Shangao escaped from the Gold Laurel Palace, they must have headed south towards the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Along the way, Qinlan must have sent a message to his master Qin Dong to explain the situation. When Qin Dong heard that his disciple had been humiliated, he was naturally furious and brought the 3 elders to seek revenge. In the past half a month, Jiang Tianyi had always felt that someone was spying on them. Without a doubt, it was related to the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. As expected, Qinlan stared at Jiang Tianyi with a cold smile and said mockingly, Jiang Tianyi, I didn't expect you to have such good eyesight to recognize the left guardian and the elders. Since that's the case, you should know our motive, right? Jiang Tianyi snorted and said with disdain, back in the Gold Laurel Palace we had a fair fight. Since you lost, you had to fulfill the bet. I didn't expect you to be so despicable as to ask your elders to seek revenge. Qinlan, you don't deserve to be a disciple of the clan. Hearing those words, Qinlan frowned deeply and her expression turned gloomy. But before he could say anything, the left guardian Qin Dong, who was the leader of the group, shouted coldly in a dignified tone, Junior of the Jiang clan, it's not up to you to judge my disciple. It was the Jiang clan's elders who disregarded their status and humiliated my disciple first. Today you must give me an explanation. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this place. Chapter 3495. Qin Dong's anger and protectiveness were evident at this moment. He didn't care who was right or wrong. He only knew that his most valued disciple Qinlan had been humiliated by the Jiang clan. Furthermore, he had lost the primordial jade marrow that he had given him. To Qinlan this was a huge loss. To Qin Dong it was also a huge humiliation. Therefore he definitely couldn't take this lying down. He had to get back at them. Most importantly, Qinlan repeated Ji Tianxing's words to him word for word. Yan Shangao, not to mention an old man like you, even if your sect leader Su Bailian was here, he wouldn't dare to be impudent to this king. Who am I? Strictly speaking, the two of you have to call me old master. It was this sentence. Back then it had shocked Qinlan and Yan Shangao. At the same time, it had also made them very confused and humiliated. Qinlan couldn't tell if this sentence was true or false, so he told Qin Dong. After Qin Dong heard it, he was furious and filled with killing intent. An unknown young man was actually so arrogant? He actually dared to call himself an elder of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and didn't even put the sect leader in his eyes? This was simply too ridiculous, too lawless. No matter what, Qin Dong had to find that arrogant fellow and punish him severely. Otherwise, where would the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's face go? It was because of these reasons that Qin Dong personally brought the 3 elders to intercept Jiang Tianyi and the rest. Swoosh. Qin Dong used his eyes to signal, and the 3 elders Qinlan and the rest quickly dispersed. Everyone surrounded the Palace of Heaven's Will with a murderous aura. Jiang Tianyi stood at the entrance of the palace and glared at Qin Dong. He asked in a low voice, Protector Qin, what are you trying to do? Don't forget, I'm the 9th young master of the Jiang clan. If you do anything to us, it's a declaration of war against the Jiang clan. The alliance and agreement between the clans will also be broken because of you. Jiang Tianyi was neither servile nor overbearing. His tone carried anger and warning. Qin Dong didn't think much of it. He stroked his beard and sneered. What bullshit 9th young master. In front of me he's just a brat who's still wet behind the ears. I will naturally not break the agreement of the clan alliance. After all, I won't kill you today. I'm just here to teach you a lesson on behalf of the Jiang clan and make you pay the price you deserve. What do you mean? Jiang Tianyi shouted coldly as he clenched his fists. Qin Dong was still stroking his beard. His seemingly thin and old body emitted a domineering aura that soared into the sky. Simple. Hand over the 2 weapon refinement geniuses and bow to Qinlan in apology. Then I'll spare you. Jiang Tianyi's body trembled and then he sneered. After talking for so long, you're here to snatch people away. Why do you need to find those high-sounding excuses? Qin Dong disdained to argue and said in a deep voice, I don't want to repeat myself. You only have 10 breaths of time to consider. Of course, you should have thought of the consequences of refusing. Without waiting for him to finish, Jiang Tianyi puffed out his chest and said resolutely, Qin Dong, you're delusional. Even if I die here, I will never hand over those 2 people, much less apologize to Qinlan. Very good. Qin Dong frowned and sneered with a dark expression. Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for being impolite. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised both hands and punched at Jiang Tianyi, who was hundreds of thousands of feet away. Whoosh! 2 mountain-sized fists of divine fire, carrying hundreds of divine Dao laws, smashed toward Jiang Tianyi with the power to destroy the world. At this moment, the surrounding thousands of miles were covered in fire and the air froze. The sky for thousands of miles was disturbed by divine Dao laws, and many spatial cracks appeared, revealing the pitch-black void. The palace of heavens was also violently shaken by the violent divine power. Jiang Tianyi and the palace were about to be hit by the fists. At this critical moment, Jiang Tianyi roared angrily and proudly went up to meet them. Break! He gripped the divine sword with both hands and unleashed all of his power, slashing out 2 giant swords. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the 2 giant swords struck the fists of fire at the same time, creating a firestorm that blotted out the sky. However, the 2 giant swords shattered, but the fists of fire remained intact, only weakened a little. Bam! The 2 fists of fire hit Jiang Tianyi at the same time, sending him flying back and crashing into the palace's entrance. Plop! There was another loud explosion. Jiang Tianyi rolled on the ground for dozens of times, spilling blood all over the ground before stopping in the palace. The palace of heavens will also violently shook, bursting with divine light. Obviously, Jiang Tianyi wasn't Qin Dong's match at all. He couldn't even take one move. 8th level Divine King Realm? You haven't fought for more than 200 years and you've broken through? He struggled to get up, using his sleeve to wipe the blood off his face as he stared coldly at Qin Dong. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect was the Jiang clan's old enemy. Therefore, Jiang Tianyi knew the key figures of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. But he didn't expect that the left guardian Qin Dong, who had always been at the peak of the 7th stage, had broken through to the 8th stage. This was definitely not good news for the Jiang clan. As expected, Qin Dong stroked his beard and sneered, That's right. Just 10 years ago I broke through. So little fellow, you'd better hand them over and apologize to Qinlan. Although I won't kill you, I'll make you wish you were dead. Ha ha ha. Jiang Tianyi staggered as he stood up, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He sneered unyieldingly, I've said it just now, don't even think about it. Aren't you very domineering? Isn't the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect arrogant? Come kill me. As he spoke, Jiang Tianyi walked out of the palace. At the same time, he held a communication jade slip in his hand and sneered, I'll report everything that happened today to the clan leader. Only by killing me can you snatch away those 2 armament refining geniuses. But the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect won't have it easy either. Although Jiang Tianyi wasn't as powerful as Qin Dong, he represented the Jiang clan. He couldn't be humiliated and beg for mercy. Even if he died in battle, he couldn't let the Jiang clan be humiliated. Qin Dong had expected him to be so stubborn. He sneered even more. Haha, the trash of the Jiang clan have always been so stubborn. Since you won't give in, I'll take them myself. As he spoke, Qin Dong raised his palms again and threw out palm shadows that covered the sky at Jiang Tianyi. Whoosh, whoosh. Without a doubt. After Jiang Tianyi was hit by the giant palm, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. But Jiang Tianyi was fearless. He puffed out his chest and held his divine sword again as he launched a counterattack. At this moment, an angry roar came from the palace's main hall. "Qin, you old bastard, you've gone too far." Following the angry roar, a dazzling figure shot out of the palace like a shooting star and met the giant palm in the sky. It was Jiang Tianxing. Chapter 3496. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing teamed up to face Qin. Jiang Tianyi didn't have time to ask Jiang Tianxing why he was here. He only knew. If he couldn't block Qin attack, he and Jiang Tianxing would be in trouble. Even if they didn't die, they would be severely injured. Boom. In the next moment, dozens of dazzling sword lights clashed with the giant palm, creating a deafening explosion. It was like thunder echoing through the sky. The dazzling sword lights collapsed and more than half of the giant palm was shattered. Tens of millions of fragments of divine light shot out in all directions like a violent storm. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were both hit by the palm. With a muffled sound, the two of them flew back in a sorry state. While he was still in midair, he opened his mouth and spat out a scarlet arrow of blood that scattered across the sky. Plop, plop. Then the two brothers crashed into the palace at almost the same time. After rolling dozens of times, they fell to the ground. Without a doubt, they were both injured by Qin. However, Jiang Tianxing's injuries were more serious. Not only did his divine sword fly out of his hand, his right arm was broken and there was a huge hole in his chest. He was covered in blood and blood was foaming from his mouth and nose. He was on the verge of losing consciousness. On the other hand, Jiang Tianyi was only dizzy. His right arm was broken and his strength was greatly reduced. The blood in his body kept churning. He struggled in the air for a while before flying back to the palace. As for Jiang Tianxing, he fell down from the sky and smashed into the ruins with a loud thud, raising a cloud of dust into the air. This scene made Jiang Tianyi's expression extremely ugly. His eyes were extremely serious. The elders of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, Qinlan and Yan Shangao, all sneered. Qin looked down at Jiang Tianyi from above and said in an indifferent tone, "Brat, don't put up any more resistance. It's meaningless. Hand over the two blacksmithing geniuses and apologize to Qinlan. Also, hand over the human youth called Tianxing and this matter will be over." Jiang Tianyi was still unwilling to admit defeat. He looked up at Qin and said firmly, "I said don't even think about it." Qin sneered. "I said I wouldn't kill you, but since you're so stubborn, I don't mind crippling you and sending you back to the Jiang clan like a dead dog." To Qin this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Plus, he definitely had the guts to do it. However, he didn't expect Jiang Tianyi to just stare at him. Jiang Tianxing struggled to crawl out of the deep pit in the ruins. His face was covered in blood as he roared, "Qin, you damned old man. As the left protector of the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, you actually personally attacked us juniors. Do you think our Jiang clan has no one? If you have the guts, look for our Jiang clan's protector. I guarantee that he will wring the heads of your entire family." Qin looked down at Jiang Tianxing, who was in the ruins, and grinned coldly. "I'm bullying a junior? Where? Didn't he also bully my disciple Qinlan? It was your Jiang clan who was shameless first. What right do you have to criticize me?" Then he squinted his eyes. His body emitted a murderous aura. "Also, you're too uneducated. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of the Jiang clan." Then he waved his right hand and slashed out a crescent-shaped blade light. Whoosh! The blade light fell from the sky and hit Jiang Tianyi before he could dodge it. Crack! The crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Blood splashed out and an intact right arm flew into the sky, then fell to the ground with a thud. Jiang Tianyi's body stiffened. He lowered his head with difficulty and looked at his empty right shoulder. There was a clean cut on his right shoulder. Pale golden bone stubble could be seen. Blood was still gushing out. He was furious and scolded instinctively. However, the pain hit him. He blacked out and collapsed. Plop! Another muffled sound. Jiang Tianyi fell unconscious. Dust flew up. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He roared crazily. "Qin, you deserve to die. The Jiang clan will remember this. We'll pay you back double." While roaring, Jiang Tianyi didn't charge at Qin. He was no match for Qin. He couldn't avenge Jiang Tianyi. Even if he did, he would be humiliating himself. He landed in the ruins and picked up the unconscious Zhang Tianyi. He picked up his bloodied and dusty arm and flew back to the palace. Swoosh. He entered the palace and placed Zhang Tianyi on the ground. He was about to send a message to the Jiang clan for help. At the same time, he wanted to close the palace's door. Even if he couldn't escape, he had to try his best. If he couldn't escape, he had to hide in the palace and hold on for a while. However, Qin Dong seemed to have seen through his thoughts. Before he could close the gate of the palace, 3 dazzling lights flew in from the gate. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, 3 dazzling sword lights appeared in front of Zhang Tianyi, aiming for his head and chest. At this critical moment, Zhang Tianyi could only hold the divine sword in front of him. Bang bang bang. With a dull sound, Zhang Tianyi was sent flying again. Like a rag doll that had been crushed and covered in wrinkles, he rolled and smashed into the depths of the hall. He knocked down a few pillars, scattering debris all over the floor. The floor of the main hall was also sprayed with shocking bloodstains. He rolled into a corner of the palace, his body twitching. Large amounts of blood gushed out of his body and spread out. This time the injuries he suffered were too severe. It was difficult for him to even turn over and get up. His eyes closed and his consciousness blurred. He was on the verge of fainting. At the same time, Qin Dong walked down from the sky and landed in front of the palace's entrance. "Ha! A mantis trying to stop a chariot. You overestimate yourself." Qin Dong sneered disdainfully. He stepped into the palace and was about to enter the main hall. Zhang Tianyi looked on helplessly, unable to stop him. His mouth opened and closed as blood gushed out. He let out a muffled voice, cursing Qin Dong. But Qin Dong didn't care. He didn't even put him in his eyes. He wanted to enter the palace and personally take away the 2 forging geniuses and capture Ji Tianxing, who called himself an elder of the Jiang clan. However, just as Qin Dong's right foot stepped into the palace, an invisible divine pressure came from the depths of the palace, as if a peak divine king had descended. A low, dignified and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. "Qin Dong, after 1,000 years, you're still a trash who bullies the weak and fears the strong. How sad." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3497. It was the voice of a young man. It was cold and majestic. It was filled with disdain and disdain. Jiang Tianxing was unconscious and could not hear it. Zhang Tianyi was on the verge of losing consciousness and could hear it clearly. However, he felt that the voice was familiar yet unfamiliar. As for Qin Dong, who was standing at the entrance of the palace, his body stiffened. He was stunned. At first he felt that the voice was familiar. In the next instant, when he searched his memories and recalled the voice, endless fear surged in his mind. In an instant, his mind and reason were filled with endless fear. The familiar scenes from more than 1100 years ago that had been imprinted in his soul and would never be forgotten for the rest of his life reappeared in his mind. Instantly, Qin Dong felt a chill run down his spine. He was completely stunned. His face turned ghastly pale, his eyes opened wide as he stared fixedly at the depths of the gloomy hall, and his mind went completely blank. He was not the only one. In the sky outside the palace, the figures of Su Zhang, Gu Shi and Lu Qingsong stiffened as well. Their eyes suddenly opened wide as they revealed expressions that were filled with terror and astonishment. They couldn't believe that the strange yet familiar voice had appeared again. What followed was memories from 1,000 years ago, which surged endlessly in their minds. Scenes of swords and sabers, mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The humiliating scenes caused the 3 of them to tremble and break out in cold sweat. Back then, it was not only the 3 of them. It was also a calamity for the left guardian Qin Dong and the entire 100 Refinement Ancient sect. That day, the white-robed, black-haired human stepped into the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. He used his sword to slaughter the entire 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Regardless of whether it was the young prodigies or the respected almighties. Even the sect master and the supreme elder submitted to the white-robed young man's sword. They trembled like ants and dead dogs. The proud supreme elder could not stand the humiliation and self-detonated on the spot. In the end, more than half of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect's cave was destroyed. The mountains and rivers within 100,000 miles were reduced to ruins. However, the white-robed young man was still unharmed. That day was the nightmare of all the 100 Refinement Ancient sect's disciples. Originally, After the great battle of the gods 1,000 years ago, the white-clothed youth's blood dyed the starry sky outside the realm, and he died with hatred. The people of the 100 Refinements ancient sect thought that the nightmare was over. The humiliation and disaster of the past had dissipated with the white-clothed young man, never to return. But now, when the cold and disdainful voice sounded again, Qin Dong, Su Zhang, Guxi, Lu Qingsong and the others were all dazed. It was as if they had returned to the past, where they were surrounded by mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They remembered the fear of being dominated by that young man and that sword. What the hell? Wasn't that person already dead? How could his voice appear again? Inside and outside the palace, the only person who could still maintain her composure was Qianlong. He stared blankly at the Palace of Heaven's Will, at the terrified Qin Dong, and then at the 3 elders beside him. He couldn't understand why his master and the 3 elders would have such a reaction. They seemed to be terrified. But what were they afraid of? Thinking up to this point, Qianlong could not help but look at Yan Shangao behind her, wanting to ask him about it. However, he realized that Yan Shangao was also trembling. His face was ashen and his expression and eyes were filled with fear. In fact, he seemed to be in a daze and his mind was not clear. Uncle Yan, what's going on? That voice just now seemed to belong to that bastard Tianxing. Why did you? Yan Shangao stared at the Palace of Heaven's Will with his eyes wide open. His voice trembled as he roared crazily, "It's him. It's his voice. He's back. This is impossible. He clearly died a long time ago. How can he still be alive? Why didn't I notice it before? Why is it him?" Seeing how terrified Yan Shangao was and how he was howling hysterically, Qianlong suddenly understood something. He suddenly remembered. More than 1,100 years ago he left the 100 Refinements ancient sect under his master's orders to carry out a mission in the secular world. He left for 3 years. When he completed his mission and returned to the 100 Refinements ancient sect, he saw that the entire grotto heaven was in a mess. There were ruins and smoke everywhere. The once glorious 100 Refinements ancient sect was only left with broken walls, countless corpses and blood stains. The number of people in the sect had decreased by more than half. The once high-spirited prodigies, the high and mighty elders, and the protectors had all become silent and dejected. Qianlong only knew then. All of this was because of that white-robed young man. As for his title, there were only 2 words. Hey. At that moment, Qianlong saw the reactions of Yan Shangao, the 3 elders and his master and instantly understood. It's him. It's that Kenshin from back then. No. How is this possible? Qianlong was also dumbfounded. He stared at the Palace of Heaven's Will with his mouth agape. He could not help but exclaim softly. At that moment, in the depths of the Palace of Heaven's Will's main hall, that cold and majestic voice sounded again. If the 100 Refinements ancient sect is still the same as before and only knows how to bully the weak, then there's no need for it to exist. Qin Dong, Su Zhang, Guxi, Lu Qingsong. All of you are full of evil. You should atone for your sins with your deaths. As this voice sounded, an invisible pressure and killing intent surged out from the depths of the main hall. It was as if a peak god king had descended from the heavens and earth. That bone-chilling killing intent caused everyone's blood to freeze and their hearts to stop beating. It was as if they were enveloped by death. If they had only heard his voice a moment ago and still had doubts about his identity, they would have found it hard to believe. But at this moment their last doubts were dispelled. They were absolutely certain. That's right. It was him, Kenshin. That terrifying fellow had returned. At this moment Qin Dong, Su Zhang and the others couldn't help but tremble. Their minds were completely swallowed up by fear. Without any hesitation, they instinctively turned around and flew into the distance with ashen faces. Run. Run. Don't kill us. Pretend we never came. Lord Kenshin, spare us. Qin Dong, Su Zhang and the others all shouted in different voices. But they all fled the Palace of Heaven's Will as fast as they could. In the blink of an eye they had all fled without a trace. This included Yan Shangao and the terrified Qianlong. Lying in the corner of the main hall, Jiang Tianyi, who was on the brink of unconsciousness, was also stunned. How could this be? Why did young Master Tianxing's voice change? Qin Dong and the people from the 100 Refinements ancient sect didn't even see him. They only heard his voice. Why are they so scared? While he was puzzled, he suddenly remembered that Guxi had shouted, "Lord Kenshin, spare us." Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi was stunned. Lord Kenshin, it's really him. He's the benefactor of the Jiang clan. I didn't do anything wrong. Incomparable joy surged into Jiang Tianyi's heart. His vision turned black as he fainted. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3498. Before Jiang Tianyi fainted, the last thing he saw was the white-robed black-haired Ji Tianxing walking out of the palace. Then he completely lost consciousness. Swoosh. Ji Tianxing emerged from the darkness in the depths of the palace. With a single step he crossed 1,000 feet and appeared in the middle of the palace. He glanced at the unconscious Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi but didn't try to save them. Instead he formed a seal with both hands and quickly activated the array under his feet. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the thousands of divine array patterns on the floor of the palace lit up with a dazzling light. After the divine array was activated, the palace's door closed. In the next moment, the entire palace of heavens will emitted a 5-colored divine light. It tore through the sky like a sharp shuttle and flew toward the southwest. Swoosh. Under Ji Tianxing's control, the palace was like a divine ship, and its speed was raised to the maximum. In just a few seconds, the palace flew 100,000 miles and disappeared into the depths of the sea of clouds. At this moment, Qindong, Su Zhang, Qinlan, and the others were crazily flying in the sky tens of thousands of miles away. The palace of heavens will flew towards the southwest while they fled towards the southeast. The distance between the two sides had increased a long time ago. Of the 6 people, some were strong, some were weak, some were fast, and some were slow. Naturally, the distance between them widened. The fastest and slowest were separated by 10,000 miles. The slowest was Yan Shangao. The fastest was the left protector Qindong. At this moment, 100 breaths of time had passed, and the tempestuous waves and terror in Qindong's heart gradually dispersed. He suddenly woke up and realized that something was wrong, so he immediately stopped. No. That guy died 1,000 years ago. He can't have come back from the dead. We only heard the sound and he didn't appear. Why are we running? After the fear disappeared, Qindong's mind was filled with shame and anger. He suddenly felt that he must have been embarrassed and humiliated when he ran away in fear. So he decided to turn around and go back to check. But as soon as he turned around, he saw second elder Su Zhang rushing towards him. He was still panicking and unconscious. Stop. Qindong's face darkened as he reached out to stop Su Zhang. However, Su Zhang did not slow down. He shouted with a face full of fear, "Left protector, run! Run my ass! We've all been deceived." Qindong was filled with shame and indignation. He couldn't help but curse. Su Zhang immediately sobered up. He quickly slowed down and stopped beside Qindong. Then 6th elder Gu Shi and 7th elder Lu Qingsong also flew over like crazy. However, Su Zhang also came back to his senses and joined forces with Qindong to stop the crowd. Not long after, Qinlan and Yan Shangao were also stopped. The 6 god kings regained their calm and the fear in their hearts dissipated. There was no need for Qindong to say anything. Everyone recalled the situation just now and felt extremely ashamed. Damn it! We've all been deceived. Kenshin is long dead. How could he appear again? That fellow just now was just imitating Kenshin's voice. We didn't even get to see him before we were scared away. Sigh. We can only blame him for being too cruel back then. He practically destroyed our 100 Refinements ancient sect by himself. That's a nightmare for all of us and we can't forget it. The faces of the 3 elders all turned green as they discussed with shame. Qinlan was also very ashamed. He said softly, "I remember now. That voice just now should be Tianxing. He's the human youth who claimed to be an elder of the Jiang clan. However, he's definitely not a peak god king and definitely not Kenshin." Yan Shangao also came back to his senses and quickly nodded in agreement. Yes. It's that bastard who imitated Kenshin's voice and aura to scare us. The 3 elders' faces became even more unsightly. Qindong glanced at Qinlan and stared sharply at Yan Shangao. He shouted, "When the sect was in trouble back then, Qinlan was out on a mission and didn't see Kenshin. However, you've seen Kenshin. Why didn't you recognize that human youth in Hengshan Empire? Why didn't you recognize his voice?" The 3 elders also looked over with cold gazes, and their bodies were filled with anger. Yan Shangao felt very wronged. He quickly explained, "Left guardian. Kenshin died long ago. Furthermore, it's been 1,000 years. Who would have thought that he would appear again? That Tianqing's appearance and attire. Thinking about it carefully, he's 80% similar to Kenshin. However, his voice is still a little different from Kenshin back then. Qin Dong was not satisfied with this explanation. He was about to fly into a rage and reprimand Yan Shangao. Fortunately, Qinlan helped him out. Master, now is not the time to argue about this. Tianqing didn't chase after us. This means that he's not our match. It's also impossible that he's Kenshin. We have to hurry back in case we fall into his trap. Qin Dong glared at Yan Shangao and no longer pursued his failure. He ordered with a black face, "Return with me." Finished speaking, he brought Su Zhang, Qinlan and the rest and flew back majestically. After 100 breaths of time, everyone returned to their original spot. The ruins on the ground were still there and the smell of blood lingered in the air. However, it was empty in front of everyone. Heaven's Will Palace had long disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, Qin Dong and the rest's faces were as cold as ice. They were so angry that they gnashed their teeth. Bastard. Damn it. We fell into a trap. Indeed, it was that brat's scheme. Damn beast. The next time I catch him, I'll definitely hack him into pieces. After a wave of furious curses, everyone fell into vexation and regret. Qin Dong suppressed his anger and took out a divine worship as he spoke to the crowd. That brat definitely fled south. Let's continue chasing south. If I didn't guess wrongly, they'll most likely go to Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. Everyone felt that it made sense and nodded in agreement. Very soon, the 6 divine kings boarded the divine ship and flew southwest at lightning speed. Inside the divine ship, Qin Dong sat in a dark secret chamber and summoned Qinlan. Qinlan, time was tight previously. You only gave a simple report of the situation. Now Master wants you to explain the cause and process of the matter in detail. Especially that human youth. All the details related to him cannot be left out. Qin Dong's tone was ice-cold, filled with domineering majesty. Qinlan also knew that the matter was serious and could not help asking, "Master, you suspect that Tianqing is Kenshin? Or is it related to Kenshin?" Qin Dong nodded and said in a grave tone, "Although the dead can't be revived, Kenshin fell in the divine war back then. It's impossible for him to be revived. However, nothing is absolute. Especially a peak divine king like Kenshin who has already touched upon a trace of heavenly Tao's true essence. Therefore we must be careful about this matter. If he really is Kenshin, we must deal with it with all our might. We must not let the tragedy back then repeat itself. In addition, even if Tianqing is not Kenshin back then, he must have a very deep relationship with Kenshin. He knows the Jiang clan and our sect very well. His voice and aura are exactly the same as Kenshin back then. This is no coincidence. Most importantly, he has the blueprint of the 100 refinement divine hammer in his hands. No matter who he is, we must capture him. Chapter 3499. 3 days later. Tianyi Palace was like a shooting star as it sped through the clouds. Ever since they got rid of the 100 refinement ancient sex deity kings, the past 3 days had been peaceful. At this moment, Jiang Tianyi, who was lying in the corner of the hall, gradually woke up. His consciousness was still recovering and he opened his eyes in a daze. What entered his eyes was a handsome and resolute face. His expression was calm and his eyes were as deep as the night sky. Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. He moved his lips and said in a hoarse voice, "Young Master Tianqing? You helped me heal my injuries and woke me up?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Your injuries are no longer a problem. You should be able to recover after a few more months of recuperation." "Thank you, young Master Tianqing." Jiang Tianyi was filled with gratitude and quickly thanked him. Then he thought of something important and asked, "Young Master Tianqing, Qin Dong and Qinlan, where are the 100 refinement ancient sex people?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and replied calmly, "I got rid of them 3 days ago. They should be chasing after us now." "You got rid of them?" Jiang Tianyi was in disbelief and asked subconsciously, "There are 6 of them and 2 of them are high-level deity kings. Especially Qin Dong, he has broken through to the 8th degree realm. How did you get rid of them?" Thinking of this, he shook his head, which was still a little dizzy. The memories from 3 days ago gradually became clearer. He vaguely remembered that before he lost consciousness, Ji Tianqing said 2 sentences. It was those two sentences that made Qin Dong and the 100 refinement ancient sects people feel as though they had seen a ghost. Then, without waiting for Ji Tianqing to show himself, Qin Dong and the others fled for their lives. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi found it even more unbelievable and was filled with doubts. Ji Tianqing did not explain and only said in a low voice, "Your injuries are lighter and you will recover soon." But Jiang Tianqing's injuries. When Jiang Tianqing was mentioned, Jiang Tianyi's heart tightened. He quickly turned his head and looked around looking for Jiang Tianqing. "Where's ninth brother? How was his situation? I remember that he was seriously injured and his right arm was cut off by that bastard Qin Dong." Jiang Tianqing was already seriously injured. After his right arm was cut off, it affected his ability to wield his sword and cast spells. This was definitely a heavy blow to Jiang Tianqing. Ji Tianqing patted Jiang Tianyi's shoulder and comforted him. "I can understand your feelings. Jiang Tianyi's injuries are indeed too severe. However, you don't have to worry too much. His life is not in danger. I've already suppressed his injuries, but his severed arm can't be reattached in a short period of time." When he returned to the divine attraction heavenly abode, the Jiang clan would have plenty of divine pellets and elixirs to help him recover. However, if he wants to recover to his peak state, he will need at least 10 years. After hearing this, Jiang Tianyi felt slightly comforted. He cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing and said, "Then I will thank young Master Tianqing on behalf of ninth brother. Furthermore, I will report this matter to the patriarch." Of course he had to report such a big matter to the patriarch. Firstly, he was grateful to Ji Tianqing for saving his life and hoped that the Jiang clan would give him a corresponding gift and courtesy. Secondly, he wanted the experts of the Jiang clan to help him take revenge. Ji Tianqing nodded and didn't say anything else. "Alright, if you have nothing else to do, you can go and see Jiang Tianqing." After speaking, Ji Tianqing returned to the center of the hall and sat down. He closed his eyes and rested while controlling the palace's divine formation. Even though the divine formation was operating automatically and the palace of heavens flew straight to the southwest like a divine ship. Even if Ji Tianqing didn't control the formation for a long time, it wouldn't affect him. However, he still had to keep an eye on the divine formation's operation and monitor the movements within tens of thousands of miles around the palace in case of an emergency. Jiang Tianyi sat up from the ground and used his divine power to clean off the blood on his body before walking towards the secret room. There was a passageway in the corner of the hall that connected to several secret rooms. He opened the door to the last secret room and entered to see Jiang Tianqing. The situation was as Ji Tianqing had said. Jiang Tianqing's injuries had stabilized, but he was still unconscious. He lay in the divine formation and was enveloped by divine light. The healing divine formation operated automatically and continuously nourished Jiang Tianqing. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to leave the secret room. "This place isn't far from the divine attraction grotto heaven. Young Master Tianqing should know the way. I'll let him control the palace. I'll go into seclusion to heal for a few days." Thinking this, Jiang Tianyi entered his secret room and consumed a divine pill to heal his injuries. Unknowingly, half a month passed. At this time, the Palace of Heavens had already entered the South Wind region and was flying high in the sky. It was only 2 days away from the divine attraction grotto heaven. Jiang Tianyi finished his half-month-long recuperation and walked out of the secret room. At this time, his external injuries had been treated and he didn't seem to have any abnormalities. However, his internal injuries still needed to be treated and his strength was still weak. He only had 40% of his peak strength. He spread out his divine sense and observed the surroundings. Seeing the familiar mountains and forests, he completely relaxed and was filled with anticipation. After going through so many dangers, I'm finally going home. This wasn't the first time Jiang Tianyi had left the divine attraction grotto heaven. However, this was the first time he wanted to go home the most. He came to the center of the hall, cupped his hands and greeted Ji Tianqing. Then he sat in front of Ji Tianqing and started chatting. "Young Master Tianqing, we didn't encounter any trouble in the past half a month, right?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. "No one followed us and no one tried to kill us. The people from the 100 refinement ancient sect shouldn't be so fast." Jiang Tianyi asked again, "We'll be back in 2 days. Do you want me to send a message to the patriarch and ask them to prepare a welcome ceremony?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "No need. It's too troublesome. As expected, young master is still as low-key as before. Jiang Tianyi smiled. After a moment of silence he asked the question in his heart. Young master Tianxing, when the people from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect tried to stop us, you didn't even show up. You only said a few words. How did you scare Qin Dong and the others so much that they ran away in fear? Although Jiang Tianyi had already guessed Ji Tianxing's name, he had also received confirmation from Qin Dong and the others. He knew that Ji Tianxing should be Kenshin from back then. However, he didn't say it out loud. He was more interested in what Kenshin did back then to make Qin Dong and the others so afraid. Ji Tianxing said calmly, the Jiang clan and the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are old enemies. Back then I helped the Jiang clan suppress the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Furthermore, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect defended me. Therefore I gave the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect an unforgettable lesson. Jiang Tianyi listened attentively. Many scenes appeared in his mind as he imagined all kinds of possibilities. He really wanted to know what kind of unforgettable lesson it was. Chapter 3500. Unfortunately, no matter how much Jiang Tianyi asked, Ji Tianxing only smiled and did not say anything. He did not mention a single word about what happened back then. Jiang Tianyi could only give up. Since he had nothing to do, he took out his communication jade slip and sent a message to the Jiang clan's elder and his 2 elder brothers. Also, he contacted his friend in the Shimi Grotto Heaven to ask about the recent situation. After all, he had been in seclusion for half a month and did not know what was going on outside. He was sure that the Shadow Executioner Envoy and the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect would not let this go. After sending the message, he waited silently. After about 15 minutes, Jiang Tianyi received the first message. This message was from his friend in the Shimi Grotto Heaven. When Jiang Tianyi read the message in the jade slip, his expression froze. His relaxed expression was replaced by a heavy feeling, followed by a deep worry and shock. Even his hands, which were holding the jade slip, started to tremble slightly. Seeing the change in his expression, Ji Tianxing frowned and asked, "What happened?" Jiang Tianyi put away the jade slip and took a deep breath. He said in a low voice, "Young Master Tianxing, the Shadow Executioner Envoy brought more than 20 divine kings to the south to kill us. According to my friend, they have already entered the South Wind region and their target is the God's Attraction Grotto Heaven." Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, "Xianxia and Ku Yun were killed by me, so the Shadow Executioner Envoy will not let this go. Of course he will continue to chase us. Their speed is quite fast and they are very smart. They know that they can't catch up to us, so they went straight to the God's Attraction Grotto Heaven. However, this is not a big deal. It is within my expectations." Jiang Tianyi was silent for a moment before continuing. "However, these are not the only people chasing us. It is said that this matter has spread to all the major regions and has also alarmed the patrol commander. It seems like the vice commander of the patrol envoy has personally come out of the mountains and brought a few patrol envoys to chase after us." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. "The patrol commander? That should be the Azura God Emperor's right-hand man, right?" Jiang Tianyi nodded and said, "That's right. Ordinary inspectors were not qualified to have an audience with the Azura God Emperor. Above them were 2 commanders. Mr. Tianxing, the vice commander of the patrol envoy Jin Shuang, brought several patrol envoys. Divine envoy Zhan Ying also brought more than 20 divine kings. With so many divine king powerhouses gathered together, I'm afraid that no one can withstand it." Jiang Tianyi looked worried and anxious. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was as indifferent as ever. "They're just a bunch of mobs. As long as it's not the Shura God Emperor himself, what's there to fear?" Hearing his words, Jiang Tianyi was taken aback for a moment. He couldn't help but have a thought. Over 30 divine king powerhouses, and there are even quite a few high-level divine kings among them. Young Master Tianxing is actually not worried at all? Could he be the Kenshin from back then but had been hiding his strength? If that was the case, then it made sense. After all, Lord Kenshin was a peak god king. Other than the Azura God Emperor, no one is his match. Just as Jiang Tianyi was silently pondering, another ray of divine light flew over from the sky. Swoosh! Another communication jade slip landed in front of him. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly picked up the communication jade slip. Seeing the symbol on the jade slip, he explained, "This is a message from my 4th brother. Let me take a look first." Finished speaking, he used his divine sense to enter it and read the message inside. However, 10 breaths later, his brows furrowed tightly, and his expression became somewhat strange. Ji Tianxing looked at him and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen to the Jiang clan?" Jiang Tianyi shook his head and said, "Nothing happened. It's still as calm as ever. However, the Jiang clan has already received news that Divine Envoy Zhan Ying and a large group of domain lords are about to head to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. The entire Jiang clan is on the verge of facing a great enemy. The atmosphere is very tense. Fourth brother said that ninth brother and I have made a huge mistake and should try our best not to return to the Jiang clan. He told us to hide outside for a while and wait for the news to die down before returning." Ji Tianxing frowned and thought to himself, back then the various ancient clans stood at the peak of the god realm. How arrogant and prideful they were. Who would have thought that under the rule of the Azura god emperor, they would become so servile? Seeing Ji Tianxing remain silent, Jiang Tianyi hurriedly advised, "Young Master Tianxing, don't think too much. This is actually nothing. After all, I didn't report your true identity to the Patriarch and the elders. I originally planned to give them a surprise. Since they are so worried, I will send a message to them now and explain the situation to them. Don't worry, as long as the Patriarch and the elders know that you are here, they will definitely welcome you with the warmest welcome." Jiang Tianyi took out the communication jade slip and was about to send a message to the Jiang clan. Ji Tianxing hurriedly waved his hand to stop him. He frowned and thought for a moment, then said in a serious tone, "Jiang Tianyi, times have changed. The current situation is very complicated. I'm afraid I can't return to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven with you. You should also know that I have already formed a grudge with the Azura God Emperor by killing several domain lords and divine envoys. If I return to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven with you, it will definitely bring disaster to the Jiang clan." Jiang Tianyi shook his head without hesitation and advised, "Young Master Tianxing, you must not have such thoughts. You are the Jiang clan's great benefactor. No matter what the current situation is, the Jiang clan will always remember your kindness. As long as you go to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven, the Jiang clan will do their best to protect you. Even if Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner and the other domain lords go, they won't be able to do anything to the Jiang clan. Moreover, the 18 ancient clans have formed an alliance to resist the Azura God Emperor's rule. Currently, the Azura God Emperor's power is not stable yet. It is impossible for him to wage war against the Jiang clan. Once the Azura God Emperor makes a move against the Jiang clan, the 18 ancient clans will join forces to resist. The Azura God Emperor will definitely not be able to bear the consequences. A long time ago, when Ji Tianxing killed several domain lords and was pursued by Star Aspect Divine Envoy, Jiang Tianyi knew that this matter was of great importance. He also knew that Ji Tianxing was rebelling against the Azura God Emperor. However, he did not stop or oppose. In fact, he even helped Ji Tianxing. This was because he knew that the 18 ancient clans and the Azura God Emperor were also enemies. To the Jiang clan, Ji Tianxing was someone they could completely trust. At the same time, he also knew the severity of the situation. He was certain that the Azura God Emperor would not dare to wage war against the ancient clans. Ji Tianxing still wanted to say something. However, Jiang Tianyi repeatedly persuaded him with sincerity. Moreover, they were only 2 days away from the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. After much consideration, Ji Tianxing listened to Jiang Tianyi's advice and agreed to return to the Jiang clan with him. After all, Ji Tianxing also wanted to see how the Jiang clan had developed. What was the relationship and situation between the Jiang clan and the Azura God Emperor? In the future, when he fought against the Azura God Emperor, would the Jiang clan help him? Chapter 3501. 2 days passed quickly. That evening, the Palace of Heavens landed in a majestic mountain range and flew into a deep canyon. This smoky canyon was the entrance to the God's Guide Grotto Heaven. On the surface, there was nothing unusual about the canyon. However, the door to the God's Guide Grotto Heaven was hidden between the cliffs. The door to the Palace of Heavens opened. Jiang Tianyi stepped out of the hall and stood at the door. He looked around and saw that the canyon was quiet and empty. His gaze landed on the cliffs and a gratified smile appeared on his face. It seems that nothing has happened to the Jiang clan. Those divine envoys and domain lords haven't arrived yet. This made Jiang Tianyi's hanging heart fall back into his stomach. He didn't waste any more time. He formed a seal with both hands and released divine power to form a seal. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Mysterious and special seals were imprinted on the cliffs one after another. Soon the ordinary-looking brown cliff lit up with a dazzling white light. When Jiang Tianyi finished casting the seal, a blazing white spatial door appeared. Whoosh! The 3-meter-tall spatial door emitted surging divine power and connected to the God's Guide Grotto Heaven. I'm back. This time I've made such a great contribution that everyone will look at me differently. Jiang Tianyi clenched his fists and revealed an expectant look. He was about to put away the palace and step through the spatial door to enter the God's Guide Grotto Heaven. At this moment, the spatial gate rippled with divine power and a few figures walked out of it. The leader was a white-haired middle-aged God clan member about 50 years old. He wore a luxurious divine crown and wore a purple gold robe. He also held a scepter in his hand. Jiang Tianyi was no stranger. This was the Jiang clan's current clan leader, Jiang Chuyun. Behind Jiang Chuyun, there were 5 elders in purple robes. 2 of them had aged faces, while the other 3 were middle-aged men. In addition, there were 2 God King experts with imposing auras and cold faces. They also followed Jiang Chuyun. They were the Jiang clan's left and right protectors. Seeing these 8 experts appear, Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He couldn't help but think, strange, how did the patriarch, protector and elders know I'm back? Could it be that they had already gathered together and were waiting for me to return? But I haven't told them that I found the benefactor of the Jiang clan. With that in mind, Jiang Tianyi couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart and hurriedly stepped into the sky to greet him. Tianyi greets the patriarch, the left and right protectors and the elders. Jiang Tianyi stood in the sky and bowed to Jiang Chuxing and the others, respectfully saying. However, Jiang Chuxing, the Dharma protectors, and the elders all looked at him with complicated expressions, but no one told him to get up. Everyone's expressions and eyes were filled with disappointment and indignation. The atmosphere was rather strange. Jiang Tianyi vaguely felt that something was wrong. He raised his head to look at Jiang Chuxing and the others and asked, Patriarch, how did you know that disciple has returned? Although 9th brother and I have made contributions, we shouldn't have troubled the elders to come to the entrance to welcome us. Jiang Chuxing looked at him expressionlessly and said in a low voice, When you contacted 4th brother, the elders and I calculated the time and knew that you would return today. Jiang Tianyi, why didn't you listen to 4th brother's advice? Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He remembered 4th brother's warning to him to hide outside for a while and not return to the Jiang clan. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi felt even more that something was wrong. He asked, Patriarch, what happened? Don't ask. Jiang Chuxing said expressionlessly, Let Jiang Tianxing out and the 2 blacksmithing geniuses you recruited. Jiang Tianyi was a little nervous. 9th brother is seriously injured and is still unconscious. Before he could finish, the left protector said expressionlessly, Bring him out. We will deal with him. Jiang Tianyi didn't dare to disobey. He hurriedly took out the unconscious Jiang Tianxing from Tianyi Palace. Of course, Lin Zhen and Zhan Longxiang also left the palace and appeared in the sky. Lin Zhen and Zhan Longxiang were cultivating when they suddenly appeared in the sky. They were stunned when they saw several godly king experts in front of them. The 2 were stunned for a moment before realizing that these were the godly king experts of the Jiang clan. They hurriedly bowed. However, Jiang Chuyun, the left and right protectors and the elders directly ignored them. 3rd elder, send them back to the Jiang clan. Jiang Chuyun waved his scepter and ordered. The 2 elders in purple robes acknowledged the order and hurriedly carried the unconscious Jiang Tianxing. Together with Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant, they stepped into the space gate. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi felt that the atmosphere was even weirder. Jiang Chuyun said expressionlessly, Jiang Tianxing recruited 2 blacksmithing geniuses from the Hengshan Empire to replenish the Jiang clan with new blood. This is a great merit. However, you, Jiang Tianyi, you have disappointed us too much. Not only did you fail to complete your mission, but you have also brought disaster to the Jiang clan. Tell me, how should you be punished? Jiang Chuyun's tone was dignified. His face was filled with anger as he stared sharply at Jiang Tianyi. The left and right protectors and the 4 elders also looked at him with disappointment and indignation. Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He had thought many times about how the Jiang clan would welcome and reward him when he returned to the divine attraction Grotto Heaven. However, he never expected that the clan leader would bring the protectors and elders to denounce him outside the entrance. He hurriedly explained, Clan leader, please calm down. I know that I helped young Master Tianqing fight against the patrolling god envoys and angered several god envoys and domain lords. I might even have angered the Azura god emperor. I shouldn't have done anything and brought disaster to the Jiang clan for no reason. However, do you know who that young Master Tianqing is? You will never be able to guess his true identity. When he said this, Jiang Tianyi kept them in suspense and revealed a mysterious smile. Unexpectedly, Jiang Chuyun and the protectors and elders were not interested in this at all. Instead, they were even angrier and expected better from Jiang Tianyi. Bastard! Jiang Chuyun shouted angrily and reprimanded with a dignified expression. You brought disaster to the Jiang clan, but you still don't know how to repent. How disappointing. Jiang Tianyi, the Jiang clan must have treated you too well for you to be so complacent. The right protector also reprimanded with a cold expression. Jiang Tianyi, the young Master Tianqing you speak of not only brutally killed several domain lords, but also 2 god envoys. This is a challenge to the Azura god emperor, a traitor who goes against the orthodoxy of the god emperor. As a disciple of the Jiang clan, it's fine if you don't punish the traitor but you actually collude with the traitor? Has the Jiang clan taught and nurtured you for so many years all gone down the drain? Although the left protector and the elders didn't say anything, Jiang Tianyi saw their expressions and knew that they had the same thoughts. Instantly, Jiang Tianyi's hot-bloodedness cooled down. His heart was filled with deep disappointment and astonishment. He had never expected that the once proud and unyielding Jiang clan elder would become like this. Chapter 3502. Disappointment. Heartache. Jiang Tianyi's gaze swept across the patriarch, the left and right protectors and the elders, and he felt a deep sense of loss. All this time the patriarch and the elders have taught us to never forget our identity. We are one of the noblest bloodlines in the world, inherited from the ancient times. No matter who it is, even the Azura god emperor who rules the boundless heaven continent, don't even think about making us bow our heads. The Jiang clan's disciples would rather die standing than live kneeling. These words were taught to me by all of you. Jiang Tianyi sneered and shook his head. But now, the Azura god emperor hasn't said anything and only 2 divine envoys were killed. How can you react like this? Are you afraid? Have you all forgotten what you taught me back then? Jiang Tianyi was no longer as docile and respectful as before. He had become somewhat deranged. He actually criticized the patriarch, the left and right protectors and the elders in front of them. Anger appeared on everyone's faces and their eyes flashed coldly. Jiang Tianyi, are you crazy? How dare you speak to the patriarch like this? How dare you contradict the patriarch in front of everyone? Jiang Tianyi, you're too daring and unrestrained. You unfilial son who gave you the courage to criticize us. Jiang Tianyi, we're doing this for your own good. How can you not understand our good intentions? Apologize to the patriarch and accept your punishment. The left and right protectors and the elders were furious and began to reprimand Jiang Tianyi. 4th elder was the closest to him and hurriedly urged him to admit his guilt. However, Jiang Tianyi smiled bitterly and said in a mocking tone, I didn't do anything wrong, so why should I admit my guilt? Unless you're doing this on purpose for the divine envoys to see. Jiang Tianyi wasn't stupid. He had already seen through the patriarch, protectors and elders' attitudes. He even suspected that divine envoy Shadow Executioner and the divine kings had already contacted the Jiang clan. Jiang Chuyun's face darkened and he shouted coldly, Bastard! Jiang Tianyi, don't blame me for being merciless for your stubbornness. You've repeatedly violated the clan's rules. I'm going to execute the clan's rules right now and punish you severely. I'll punish you by sending you to the torture hall and handing you 300 soul-severing whips. Then you'll be sent to Icebound Cliff to reflect on your mistakes in isolation for 500 years. Great Elder, take him down. Jiang Chuyun didn't waste any more words with Jiang Tianyi. She convicted him in front of everyone and sentenced him to punishment. Following his order, the 1st elder in charge of the disciplinary hall immediately stepped towards Jiang Tianyi and was about to capture him. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi hurriedly retreated and retorted loudly, 300 soul-severing whips? Thrown into Icebound Cliff for 500 years? What kind of heinous crime have I committed to deserve such a severe punishment? Such a severe punishment had not appeared in the Jiang clan for hundreds of years. This punishment was second only to betraying the clan. However, Jiang Chuyun, the guardians, and the elders had no intention of explaining or pleading for leniency. Jiang Tianyi couldn't escape the Great Elder's capture. Furthermore, with the Patriarch and the left and right protectors present, there was no way he could escape. At this critical juncture he could only roar with grief and indignation. Originally I brought young Master Tianqing back to give you all a surprise. However, now that things have come to this, I can only let him meet you in advance. As he spoke, he used his divine sense to contact Ji Tianqing in the palace. Seeing that the Great Elder was unmoved and pounced over with a cold expression, Jiang Tianyi hurriedly dodged and continued, "Didn't you all say that 1,100 years ago when our clan was in danger, a white-robed young master came to save the Jiang clan? All the Jiang clan disciples are grateful for that young master's kindness and treat him as the Jiang clan's second parent. We will never forget him. Now the Jiang clan's benefactor has returned." When he said the last sentence, Jiang Tianyi almost roared it out. As his voice fell, the palace of heavens was absorbed into his body. In the air behind him, a white-robed, black-haired and black-eyed human youth appeared out of thin air. It was Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stood proudly with his hands behind his back, looking at the Jiang clan with a calm expression. An invisible divine pressure spread out from his body and enveloped the entire canyon. Instantly, the Great Elder who captured Ji Tianqing froze on the spot when he saw Ji Tianqing's appearance. The Patriarch Jiang Chuyun, the right protector, and the four elders also looked as if they had seen a ghost. They stared at Ji Tianqing completely petrified. The canyon was dead silent. Everyone was dumbfounded and looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi smiled and said, "Patriarch, left and right protectors, elders, I am not stupid. If young Master Tianqing was not the Jiang clan's benefactor, why would I help him and bring him back to the Jiang clan? Not only am I not wrong, but I have also contributed." Jiang Tianyi's voice broke the silence. Jiang Chuyun, the left and right protectors, and the elders immediately came back to their senses and burst into a discussion. Heavens! It really is him, he actually came back. Didn't the sword god perish in outer space a long time ago and turn into ashes? How could he come back from the dead? I really can't believe this is real. Maybe this person only looks like Kenshin and is not the real Kenshin. Everyone could not accept this result. Jiang Chuyun released his divine sense and carefully observed Ji Tianqing. His expression became extremely complicated. His appearance and appearance are 80% similar, but the aura of his divine sense is exactly the same. He should be Kenshin. But Kenshin died in front of tens of thousands of gods. How could he come back from the dead? Moreover, his strength seems to have dropped a lot. He is only a middle divine king? What is going on? At this moment, Ji Tianqing looked at Jiang Chuyun with a playful smile. "Jiang Chun, I trust you have been well since we last met." Jiang Chuyun's body stiffened, and his expression became even more complicated. He stiffly raised his hands and saluted. "Senior Kenshin, is it really you?" Ji Tianqing smiled but did not say anything. He looked at the elders, a middle-aged man with dark skin and a thin figure. "Jiang Chuxing, after 1,000 years, you don't even salute me?" The middle-aged man called Jiang Chuxing was the second elder of the Jiang clan. At the same time, he was also one of Kenshin's in-name disciples. Back then, Kenshin saved him and Jiang Chuxiao and stayed in the Jiang clan for half a year. Jiang Chuxing and Jiang Chuxiao thought of all sorts of ways to curry favor with Kenshin and shamelessly followed him, wanting to be his disciple. Kenshin had no choice but to accept them as in-name disciples. There were many such in-name disciples all over the God realm and the Dragon realm. Jiang Chuxing only came back to his senses after being called out by Kenshin. His expression was rather awkward. He hurriedly walked out of the crowd and bowed to Ji Tianqing. He said respectfully, "Disciple Jiang Chuxing greets Master. It is not that disciple is rude, but Master, your resurrection is too shocking." Chapter 3503. At this moment, everyone in the Jiang clan recalled the peerless grace of Kenshin 1,100 years ago. Those scenes of mountains and rivers collapsing and the sun and moon falling were unforgettable. The reverence engraved in the depths of their souls emerged again. Even though Kenshin had come back from the dead and his strength had dropped. But Jiang Chuyun, the guardians, and the elders were all in awe of Ji Tianqing and didn't dare to act rashly. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else. Jiang Chuyun, the guardians, and the elders all had complicated expressions. Their eyes were filled with hesitation and struggle. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, Jiang Tianyi took the initiative to shout, Clan leader, guardians and elders, Lord Kenshin's return today is a joyous occasion. Let's not stand here. Let's go back to the Jiang clan and host a banquet to avoid neglecting our esteemed guest. Jiang Tianyi wanted to resolve the awkwardness. But as soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Chuyun, the left guardian, and the others all glared at him with obvious warning. Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He was a little stunned and confused. Ji Tianxing saw everyone's reaction and already had an answer in his heart. He looked at Jiang Chuyun with a playful smile on the corner of his mouth and asked, "Looks like after 1,000 years things have changed. Jiang Chuyun, if I'm not wrong, the Shadow Executioner envoy has been here?" Jiang Chuyun was speechless. He hesitated and didn't know how to answer. Ji Tianxing nodded and continued, "It seems that you don't welcome my arrival. Since the Jiang clan has bowed to the Azura God Emperor, I won't force you. The world is long, we'll meet again." After that, Ji Tianxing cupped his hands at everyone and turned to leave. Jiang Tianyi quickly caught up with Ji Tianxing and urged him to stay. "Young Master Tianxing, please wait. Maybe it's not what you think. Maybe the clan leader and the elders just haven't come back to their senses yet." Before Jiang Tianyi could finish, the right guardian scolded, "Jiang Tianyi, you're now a criminal. Don't you dare make decisions without permission." The right protector's reaction undoubtedly confirmed Ji Tianxing's words. Jiang Tianyi stood rooted to the ground, instantly understanding everything. Looking at Ji Tianxing's back, he was speechless and didn't know how to persuade him to stay. But at this moment, the spatial door on the cliff lit up with white light again, sending out ripples of divine power. Shua. Light and shadow flashed. A tall and sturdy figure stepped out of the spatial door and arrived in the sky. This person was the Shadow Executioner. He smiled as he looked at Ji Tianxing's back. With a complacent look, he sneered and said, "I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Now that you're here, you still want to leave?" Suddenly seeing the Shadow Executioner, Jiang Tianyi's eyes widened, revealing a look of disbelief. He looked at the Patriarch, the Protectors and the Elders. Then he looked at the Shadow Executioner God Emissary. His expression turned ugly. You actually... Tens of thousands of feet away, Ji Tianxing also stopped and turned to look at the Shadow Executioner God Emissary. Seeing the Shadow Executioner God Emissary appear, he only raised his eyebrows and didn't reveal a look of surprise. "I guessed right," Ji Tianxing murmured. Looking at Jiang Chuyun and the Jiang clan, he gently shook his head and said, "You've all changed. I'm very disappointed." Although his emotions were very calm and his tone was very indifferent. When everyone heard this, their heartstrings tightened and they revealed a look of deep shame. Jiang Chuyun hurriedly bowed and said in a sincere tone, "Senior, you're magnanimous. Please don't vent your anger on the Jiang clan disciples. This is my decision. If you want to blame someone, blame it on me. For the long-term stability of the Jiang clan, I can only compromise. Please understand." Haha. Ji Tianxing sneered contemptuously and said in an indifferent tone, "There's nothing to understand. This is your way of survival. No one can force it." Jiang Chuyun was full of guilt and his cheeks were burning. He didn't dare to look at Ji Tianxing's eyes. He turned to look at the Shadow Executioner God Emissary and said expressionlessly, "Lord Emissary, my clan can only do this. The rest has nothing to do with us. The Jiang clan disciples have no obligation to help you capture people. At the same time, you can't make a move in the Jiang clan's territory." The Shadow Executioner God Emissary nodded and said with a smile, "Don't worry. I'll definitely abide by the agreement and won't make things difficult for you. Moreover, I have more than enough people to deal with this Lord Kenshin who came back from the dead." Obviously, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary had heard the conversation between Ji Tianxing and the Jiang clan. When he learned that Ji Tianxing was the former Kenshin, he was so excited that his blood boiled. Even if he used his toes to think, he knew that as long as he captured Ji Tianxing and handed him over to the Azura God Emperor, it would definitely be a great merit. After all, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary still knew a little about the Great War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. At least he knew that Kenshin was the Azura God Emperor's mortal enemy. The spatial door flashed with white light again and fluctuated with spatial energy. Swish, 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 swish. One figure after another stepped out of the spatial door and arrived in the sky above the canyon. In a short moment, 24 God King experts appeared in front of everyone. Among these God King experts there were 9 domain lords. Other than the 4 domain lords who were high God Kings, The other 20 were intermediate god kings. With such a powerful and terrifying team, even if they faced a peak god king, they still had the power to fight. Dealing with Ji Tianxing was simply too easy. The Shadow Executioner God Emissary had a confident attitude and a proud smile hung on his face. He said to Jiang Chun, there's nothing for you to do here. Bring the Jiang clan people back. Then he ordered the 24 God Kings, all God Kings listen to my order. Use all your strength to capture Kenshin. You must capture him alive. Vice Commander Lord Jin Shuang will arrive soon. When the time comes we will present this great gift to Lord Jin Shuang. Before knowing Ji Tianxing's true identity, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary's goal was to kill him. But now the Shadow Executioner God Emissary changed his mind. The 24 God Kings all drew their swords and grinned coldly, about to join forces to attack Ji Tianxing. At this time Jiang Chun suddenly shouted coldly with a dignified expression, "Stop. This seat won't interfere with your grudges, but this canyon is the Jiang clan's territory. If you want to fight, please leave this canyon. Otherwise the Jiang clan absolutely won't sit idly by." The moment these words came out, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary's expression became very ugly. Clearly Jiang Chun still wanted to help Ji Tianxing. But the Shadow Executioner God Emissary also understood that with his status, the Jiang clan did not place him in their eyes at all. Unless Lord Jin Shuang was present, only then would the Jiang clan be apprehensive. Hence, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary transmitted his order to the many God Kings, surround Kenshin and follow him out of the canyon. But very unfortunately, the 24 God Kings were just about to disperse when Ji Tianxing's entire body lit up with white light, and he disappeared into thin air. The afterimage that was left on the spot also rapidly disappeared. The Shadow Executioner God Emissary's expression changed, and he immediately waved his hand to give the order. He escaped. Quickly chase. No matter what, we must catch him. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3504. Ji Tianxing's decisive escape was within everyone's expectations. After all, the Jiang clan had submitted to the Azura God Emperor. It was clear that they would not accept or help him. Shadow Executioner led more than 20 God Kings, sharpening their swords and brimming with killing intent. In addition, Jin Shuang, the vice commander of the patrol, led a team of divine envoys. They could arrive at God's Guide Grotto Heaven at any time. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianxing had no choice but to escape. But Shadow Executioner and the others did not expect Ji Tianxing to escape so decisively. A moment ago he was still standing in the sky, motionless. The next moment he directly used a teleportation secret technique and escaped from God's Guide Grotto Heaven. Swoosh! A divine light flashed. Ji Tianxing left God's Guide Grotto Heaven and teleported 60,000 miles away. Shadow Executioner and the other Zone Lord's divine senses could detect a radius of 70,000 miles. They discovered that Ji Tianxing had escaped to the south of God's Guide Grotto Heaven. Ji Tianxing also took out a pitch-black divine sword and rode it to the south. Whoosh! He was like an aurora cutting across the sky, piercing through the firmament and disappearing into the sea of clouds. Shadow Executioner and the 20 God Kings did not hesitate. They all used their teleportation divine powers and chased south. They left in such a hurry that Shadow Executioner did not even have time to warn Jiang Chun. Swoosh! Swoosh! After a divine light flashed, Shadow Executioner and the 20 God Kings all teleported 40,000 miles away. However, the distance between them and Ji Tianxing was increasing at an extremely fast speed. The Shadow Executioner emissary made a prompt decision and ordered, Domain Lord Qinglan, steer the divine warship and lead everyone to the south. Qingkong, Sanhe, Mingluan, 3 Zone Lords, follow me and chase after Kenshin. As he spoke, Shadow Executioner took out the sky-piercing hairpin. The 3 Zone Lords did not dare to hesitate. They quickly followed him into the sky-piercing hairpin and flew south as fast as they could. Azure Blue Zone Lord took out a mid-king level divine ship and took 21 God Kings to the south as fast as lightning. Originally, after the previous experience of killing Ji Tianxing, the Shadow Executioner envoy only brought 3 Domain Lords and did not dare to chase after Ji Tianxing. Reality proved that even if he caught up with Ji Tianxing he would only be killed by Ji Tianxing. However, the situation this time was different. He knew that he was no match for Ji Tianxing, But he still took out the sky-piercing hairpin without hesitation and took the lead to chase to the south. This was because Ji Tianxing's true identity had been exposed. 1,000 years ago, his name had shaken the 4 continents of the divine realm, and he had suppressed numerous divine kings with a single sword strike. At the same time, he was also the Azura God Emperor's greatest enemy. Therefore, the Shadow Executioner emissary would not let him escape no matter what. Once he let Ji Tianxing escape the boundless heaven continent, he already guessed how the Azura God Emperor would punish him. Of course, the Shadow Executioner emissary had also thought it through. He would just follow Ji Tianxing and make sure that he was not shaken off by Ji Tianxing. He would never fight with Ji Tianxing. That would be courting death. Whoosh! The sky-piercing hairpin cut through the sky faster than the speed of light and soon closed the distance with Ji Tianxing. 50,000 miles, 45,000 miles, 40,000 miles. After all, it was a king-level high-grade divine artifact. As long as there was enough divine power to support it, its speed would far exceed the Sword of Burial of Heaven. After 20 breaths of time, the distance between the sky-piercing hairpin and the Sword of Burial of Heaven was shortened to about 10,000 miles. At this time, the Shadow Executioner emissary finally breathed a sigh of relief. He hurriedly said to the 3 domain lords, "The 4 of us will take turns to control the sky-piercing hairpin and maintain this speed, hanging behind Kenshin and keeping a distance of 10,000 miles from him. Everyone must remember, don't be shaken off by him, but don't try to intercept him either. With just the 4 of us, we are not his match at all. After all, he has several Divine King Realm accomplices with him." After saying that, he said to Clear Sky Domain Lord, "Clear Sky, you control the sky-piercing hairpin first. I have to send a message to Lord Jin Shuang and report the latest situation to him." Clear Sky Domain Lord nodded and complied. She hurriedly cast a spell to control the divine array and control the sky-piercing hairpin. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner freed his hand, took out a communication jade slip, and entered a message inside. "Lord Jin Shuang, we rushed to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven in advance. We wanted to ambush Tianxing there and kill him in one fell swoop. But we didn't expect the Jiang clan to reject him and not let him enter the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. What was even more unexpected was that Tianxing's true identity was exposed. He turned out to be Kenshin from 1,000 years ago. He once saved the Jiang clan and has a deep relationship with the Jiang clan. Although the Jiang clan didn't help Kenshin, they also didn't assist us in capturing him. Kenshin took the opportunity to escape and I'm going all out to hunt him down." After entering the message, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner sent out a communication jade slip. The next step was to wait patiently. About half an hour later, Jin Shuang sent back a communication jade slip. Whoosh! Spiritual light flew into the sky-piercing hairpin and landed in front of Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner. He hurriedly picked up the jade slip and read the message inside. Jin Shuang's voice immediately sounded in his mind. She was very excited. "That traitor is Kenshin? So that's how it is. No wonder he was so daring and dared to go against His Majesty the God Emperor and kill innocent people. Kenshin died 1,000 years ago. How could he come back from the dead now? There must be a huge secret hidden here. Shadow Executioner, you've made a great contribution this time. His Majesty the God Emperor will definitely reward you heavily. However, His Majesty the God Emperor isn't in the God Emperor Palace right now. He won't be back anytime soon. However, there's me, Commander Qi Yan, the Meng Shuai, and the Imperial Tutor. We'll definitely capture Kenshin and hand him over to His Majesty the God Emperor. What you need to do now is to follow him closely. You can't lose him. I'll arrange the entire capture plan. Just wait for my orders." Obviously, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner's report made Jin Shuang's blood boil. She was extremely excited. After reading the message in the jade slip, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner finally let out a sigh of relief. At the entrance of God Attraction Grotto Heaven, Jiang Tianyi was also stunned. He looked soullessly towards the south. His expression was very complicated. "Young Master Tianxing, I'm sorry. I didn't expect it to be like this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." These words kept surging in his mind. The guilt in his heart was about to explode. Along with the guilt, he was also thoroughly disappointed in the Jiang clan. So much so that he suddenly felt disheartened. "Ha, this kind of Jiang clan, this kind of ancient clan. What a joke." He muttered to himself. then turned and walked towards the entrance of God Attraction Grotto Heaven. When he passed by Jiang Chuyun, the left and right protectors and the others, he said expressionlessly, "Don't worry. I'll go to the disciplinary hall to receive my punishment. I'll go to the frozen cliff to reflect on my mistakes." Everyone could tell from his tone that his heart was as dead as ashes. Jiang Chuyun's body shook. She turned and looked at his back. She sighed. "Jiang Tianyi, no matter what you're thinking, I'll tell you. The world has changed. If the Jiang clan wants to continue, they must adapt to the times and go with the flow. Even if he was at his peak, didn't he still die in the War of the Gods, let alone now that his cultivation has fallen? The 5 emperors rule the world. The general trend is set. No one can change it.